Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, October 17th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Hamilton Nolan, author of The Hammer, Power, Inequality, and the Struggle for the Soul of Labor. Also on the program today, in a testy interview with Fox News, Bret Baier repeatedly interrupts Harris and spends 15 minutes on immigration fear-mongering and trans surgeries in prison.
Sounds like the Texas senatorial debate.
Harris's top economic advisor, Brian Deese, reportedly tells her to keep Lina Khan as the head of the FTC. Great news, if, of course, she follows through. A new Quinnipiac poll shows Harris up by 2 points in North Carolina, the first major pollster to show a lead. I guess Mark Robinson's lawsuit against CNN isn't really changing the trajectory of that race. But in some other polls, a more narrow race shows up, specifically in Michigan. An alarming but predictable trend, given Harris's lack of distance from Biden on Gaza. Israel says it has killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Okay. 400,000 people in northern Gaza are still without food for over 2 weeks, as Israel's plan for a full-on siege of the north draws more concern from the White House. Politico reports that in an August meeting with aid groups about starvation in Gaza, a White House envoy told them Israel was too close of an ally to cut off arms. The Supreme Court upholds Biden's EPA rule that limits pollution from coal-fired power plants. That's quite good. A judge strikes down election rule changes made by right-wingers on the Georgia State Election Board, including one that would require hand-counting paper ballots. Yeah, you can't just change election rules as the state election board. It has to go through the legislature. Georgia early voting keeps breaking records, more than doubling its first-day early voting total, a good sign for enthusiasm. And Jimmy Carter, at age 100, got to vote for Kamala Harris.
From hospice?
Yeah. Hey, we'll take it. The DeSantis administration is being sued for threatening TV stations airing ads about the abortion ballot measure. And lastly, there has been a landmark settlement in the LA Catholic Church case. $880 million for over 1,300 claims of childhood sexual abuse and assault. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's an EmMajority Report Thursday. I am here with my friend Matt Leck.
Hello.
It really is amazing that for all this talk about like groomers on the right, there is like this fundamentalist Catholic strain in the Republican Party, and the groomers are in the church, folks.
I mean, the look over their method as they assault women's reproductive freedom judicially, you need something to point to say, actually, where are the defenders of women? See
Right.
what's going on in Little League sports?
Yeah, it's so unserious and also disturbing. But let's start with this. So Kamala Harris went on Fox News last night And this was an interview. You'll hear from Bret Baier about the timing of the interview when it was recorded, because he's very upset in just a second. But
unprofessional, I would say, but whatever.
I mean, he's supposed to be, Bret Baier, the straight up news guy on Fox News, the less partisan one. The one, he's not Sean Hannity or Jesse Waters. He's supposed to be an actual journalist. But throughout this interview, it's so clear how right-wing he is. The first 15 minutes were him repeatedly interrupting her, going like about immigration and acting like the country is under siege right now. And then when they had this tense back and forth about it, then he's like, okay, next big topic, trans surgeries in prisons. And these are the two ads that Republicans have been running basically against her, is that she's soft on the border. And you see this all throughout New York State in particular, that she supported a trans person having gender affirming care in prison. Like, this is just,
bro,
who cares? And what's amazing is that there has been a lot of work done to show that in 2022, and even prior to that, anti-trans fear-mongering was a net negative for Republicans. But because this strategy is being run by a rich narcissist, and Elon Musk is also spending millions of dollars with his PAC on behalf of Trump, their fixations and obsessions become extremely prominent in the Republican strategy.
And in the sense of Elon, it's very personal.
Truly. And so it was bizarre to see this display. And in part, this was an interview that happened because Trump refused to do the Fox News debate. So then they decided to go through with a straight interview of Harris on Fox. But this was the Fox debate that Trump said he wanted. And then he ended up backing out of it because, frankly, him doing another debate this close to the election would only hurt him. So he knows this, and his handlers know this as well. But this was...
The farther they've gotten from the debate, the better he's looked.
Truly. So that was basically the first 20 minutes of the interview. Now here, Baier tries to bait Harris into doing a deplorables. This was so naked and obvious to me. He previously, before asking this question, had showed a poll that the majority of Americans think the country is on the wrong track. This has been kind of a consistent poll number throughout Trump, throughout Biden. There's a lot of pain in this country.
Yeah, I feel like before, like the whole like Bernie 2016 movement, like I think there's a lot of people probably felt then.
Right. I mean, this is just, you can't really, I think...
Who likes this track?
Right. Republicans and Democrats, we're all pissed off. So he asked her about this, and this is midway through Harris's answer, and we'll get to where he tries to bait her in a few seconds.
And I included a little bit of him.
About is that over the last decade, people have become... But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president, one, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him instead of the American people. People are tired of that.
If that's the case, why is half the country supporting him? Why is he beating you in a lot of swing states? Why, if he's as bad as you say, that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States? Why is that happening?
This is an election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy.
I know, but
it's not supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a cakewalk for anyone.
So are they misguided, the 50%?
Listen,
are they stupid? What is it?
I would never say that about the American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall.
Oh, good.
And this is how he responded.
I heard about
Clean up that mess.
They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
He was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes.
Yeah.
Let me...
Okay, yeah, he's quoted. Are you trying to, or what's the implication? You're trying to say that Bob Woodward made it up? Right
That's
there?
amazing that they would like have him sort of clarify the remark and not actually just play the thing he's been saying, including to Bloomberg, which is like, yeah, we'll have the military come in and get these far left people out of here.
It was outrageous. I mean, look, it's Fox News, but when Bear or Martha McCallum come out, like I've seen them do debates and moderate them. It's never really that explicitly right wing. They try to maintain their credibility to a certain degree. I think they're worried, but I also think that I thought that was one of her strongest moments in a while, because what I'm observing about her and what her strengths are is like when she has to sell policy, it's kind of difficult for her. Yeah. I feel like she's very self-conscious and studied.
Not the retail politician.
No, but when she gets to be combative, this was what we saw in the debate, which was her strongest moment of the campaign. When she gets to be the prosecutor and go back and forth with somebody, that's where she shines. And so this was a good answer. And also, you see, like, she was appealing to a Republican audience with all this flag waving about the American people and all these kinds of things. I think it's effective, at least for what she's going for here.
It was. And I don't know if you saw it, but Crystal Ball and Sagar had an interesting debate along the same line. And I think one side handed it to the other in that. But
well,
maybe we'll play that in the fun half.
The coverage is basically that she did really well in this debate. That's seemingly the media spin from this. So Brett Baier is pissed off. This is what he said on Sean Hannity that night. Oh my gosh, she was 20 minutes late for the interview. I mean, he acts like she spat in his face here. I mean, I've covered campaigns. Politicians are late probably 90% of the time.
Yeah, you should have some. I mean, we don't do a lot of politician stuff here, but you should have some sort of backup.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's kind of like a rule. When you go to a concert or a big concert like that, you're like, okay, they're probably going to come out 30 minutes later than they say they're going to come out. It's same expectation for a politician. But Brett Baier needed to whine on Fox last night.
Yeah, obviously, thanks, Sean. It's great to see you. It was a little tense. We were given the time of 5 p.m. Eastern time. Obviously, my show is at 6 p.m. They wanted to tape at 5 p.m. We said we were going to tape as live. In other words, roll the tape and then just turn that around, unedited, uninterrupted, and but we had to do it before 5:15. Otherwise, we couldn't turn the whole machine around before the top of the 6 p.m. show. So
like the Titanic.
We were waiting at 4:55, and then 5, and then 5:05, and then 5:10. At 5:17, the vice president walked out. So it did feel a little bit like they were icing the kicker or trying to. And originally they were talking about 25 minutes and they gave us 20 minutes. And I was fine with any time. I was really happy to get the interview.
He's the Adam Vinatieri of...
Yeah, obviously.
What? Are you joking? Are you joking? Trump is notoriously late all the frickin' time. I'm sorry. But if you thought that you did well or she came off poorly in that interview, honestly, he would have had something better to say.
I was worried he was going to say, then they made us do edits, but no, they let you just play it out as it was live. And this is all just him saying like, oh yeah, like you said, I got worked and I need to make an excuse for it, but you are not Adam Vinatieri. This is not a Super Bowl game-winning kick. This is your job as a journalist.
Yes.
I'm sorry if Fox News, I don't know how much $1 billion in revenue that they make. Turn the interview around, all right? We can do that. Left Reckoning, we often...
Matt, wait, okay, so we'll do a pre-record in the morning. How long does it take for you to cut it up so that we can put it out for the show?
You know, we're limited by the 8-core processor we have here and the video card, but probably 10 minutes, I would say, to export that.
When we do pre-records, and if the pre-recorded guest is like 10 minutes late, honestly, it's basically an assault on our democracy and on our integrity. As
they're icing the kicker, clearly.
Clearly. They're just so worried about what we're going to say. So yeah, that was a good interview for her. Again, a lot of this is still within this context of like trying to fight back this notion that she's too liberal. But actually, Sam and I were talking about this over the long weekend, and I forgot to make this point. Somebody, and I'm not going to be able to credit them because I don't have the tweet in front of me. Maybe I can quickly grab it here. But they made this point that I just think is exactly right about that perception of Kamala Harris as too liberal. Here we go. I found it. Austin Allman made this point. It is not unreasonable that the Harris team is worried about polling that says people think she's too liberal. The problem is they do not seem to understand that those views are largely detached from policy, and working overtime to change them in 3 months has exacerbated her actual biggest weakness, which is that people think she has no vision and believes in nothing. And that's an exact summary, right? Like I'm want to be as progressive as you can when you talk about policy and what is possible and pushing for those kinds of things. I'm an election pragmatist, and I want the Democrats to win. That's always been the way that I've approached this kind of thing. But this is the exact right point about what the strategy has been post-convention. When people say she's too liberal, do you know what that means? She's a lady. She's black.
Yeah.
She's from California.
Cali.
Yeah, like that's it. And so it's a misconception, I think, about what the real liabilities are here. And I still think it will have some effect. Like it is. She's gained with independents recently. And also gained with Republicans. So that's been the strategy, and those are high propensity voters. That's what they're banking on. But there could have been another way, and I think they just fundamentally misunderstand what the root of the too liberal polling concerns.
To that point, there's a better way of doing that strategy to this question, which is to say there's a lot of reasons people vote for Trump, despite having a lot of reservations about him. Say religious people voting him because of they believe in pro-choice thing. Now, I'm not going to go after those voters, but go after that. There's a lot of people who vote for Trump because guess what? Like the people on the left, they realize like this is one office.
Right.
And like at a certain point, it's one or the other.
All right, folks. A quick word from our sponsor, and then we will be speaking to Hamilton Nolan. Have you thought about a gift for yourself this year? You deserve it. It's a very stressful election cycle.
Only about 90 times.
Yes. For Matt, it's getting new running shoes.
Okay, easy.
I got new ones, actually, and I wanted to get your opinion on them, but later on. For me, it's I don't know, a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, something like that. But also, I'm thinking of going to Europe actually for my honeymoon, and I could use Babbel, and will be using Babbel. Babbel is the tool that has the power to help you grow, learn, and become a better version of yourself. Give yourself the gift of language by getting Babbel. First of all, my sister used Babbel, and she said it was really helpful when she was traveling. I'm definitely going to be using Babbel for that purpose because I want to be able to go to a country where I don't speak the language and at least be able to get around. And
you want
to
to read the signs, yeah.
Right.
And the menus.
Speak like a whole new you with Babbel, the language learning app that gets you talking. With a quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you talking a new language in 3 weeks. And because talking is the key to really knowing a language, Babbel is designed for real conversation. Wasting hundreds on private tutors is the old way of learning languages. Babbel's tips and tools are inspired by real-life stuff you'll actually need when talking. With a focus on conversation, you'll be ready to talk wherever you go. Want more proof that Babbel gets you talking? Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and other leading universities continue to prove that Babbel works. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. With over 16 million subscriptions sold, Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by a 20-day money-back guarantee, so your gift to yourself or your loved ones is risk-free. This holiday season, give the gift of language with Babbel, and here's a special holiday deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/majority. 60% off, up to 60% off at babbel.com/majority, spelled BABBEL.com/majority. Rules and restrictions may apply. All right, quick break, and when we come back, we will be with Hamilton Nolan. We are back, and we are joined now by Hamilton Nolan, journalist, labor writer for In These Times, author of The Hammer, Power, Inequality, and the Struggle for the Soul of Labor. He also has a Substack called How Things Work. Hamilton, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So you write about how unions and the labor movement could be the best way to save American democracy. And I just love that framing and that thesis, because obviously we know that unions are incredibly important for, protecting workers, bargaining for fair wages, all that stuff. But so often I think our politics, as it relates to democracy, focus on election day, right? But unions are incredibly important forces for democracy in the workplace, and then using that power and leverage for democracy in politics. If you could just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we hear so much, especially during election season, about how important it is to save our democracy, defend our democracy, and if you think about the average person in America, when is the average person actually experiencing democracy in their day-to-day lives? You're born, you're in a family, that's not a democracy. You go to school, that's not a democracy. And you get a job, and your job is a dictatorship and not a democracy. And so the reality is, like, unions and being in a good, high quality labor union is one of the only places that people really get to experience the lived reality of being in a democratic organization and small d democracy. So unions are not just these things that have good economic effects for workers, which they are, but they're also kind of like training schools for the reality of democracy for regular people. And it's such an important experience. Being in a union shows people that democracy as a process can work, and shows them the possibility of democracy as a process. And that is one of the reasons why it's so important that we get millions more people into unions, because the fewer people that get to experience that, the fewer people, I think, actually believe in small d democracy as something that should be defended in the first place.
And I guess compare the unionization and the labor movement and democracy with things like the Occupy movement. I think you mentioned that in your book, because there was a lot of really bad faith criticism about the Occupy movement being unfocused or not having demands, and that there's a kernel of truth to that, in the sense of, like, the labor movement, when we're combating economic inequality, has many more concrete goals and demands and achievable aims, right? Where I feel like there's a real contrast there when you're talking about those two movements and what's the most effective way to be democratic as it relates to the 99%.
Yeah, I'm not a person who criticizes movements like Occupy. I think Occupy had an incredibly important effect, which was elevating the idea of inequality into the mainstream in America. And if that was the only thing that Occupy did, that was an incredible service.
Right.
I mean, there's movements and then there's institutions in society, and movements are things that are kinetic and they happen and they're actions and they're changing society. And then institutions are the things that are permanent and that, carry out the goals of the movement. And so the labor movement, if you think of it, kind of straddles that line between institution and movement. And it's really important that you have elements of both things, I think, in a healthy labor movement. You cannot lose the spark that movements have, like Occupy. What Occupy had was that energy, anger, and it channels that, and so you ideally want to channel that anger and energy into permanent institutions that can then exist and carry out the goals of the movement forever. And that's, what labor unions in America is the product of 100+ years of people striking and fighting and being shot and being evicted and all the sacrifices that working people in America made, to build those unions. Unions can become the permanent institutions, and then of course the danger on the other side is like, do you become so institutional that you lose the connection and the energy that the movement had and sort of fail to carry out your purpose? And that, I think, is a real danger for the labor movement today in terms of its existing institutions, at least.
So in terms of the history of the labor movement, I guess we could talk about, union density in the 1950s as to versus where we are now. It's 1 in 3 workers, right? In 1950s, we're in a union, and it's not that today. So, we're in a much more friendly environment for labor under the Biden administration. I think that's been probably the greatest, that and antitrust has been the strengths of his presidency, but we still are not anywhere close to where we need to be in terms of union density. If you could just take us through some of that history.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important for people to understand, when people kind of wonder how we got into the situation that we're in today, it's important to understand after World War II, in the mid-1950s, 1 in 3 workers in America was a union member. And that level of union power produced the greatest shared prosperity that this country has ever seen, and ironically produced the golden age that Republicans are always talking about wanting to go back to. That was produced by the power of the working class in the form of widespread union membership. And today it's 1 in 10. 1 in 10 workers in America is a union member today, and only 6% in the private sector. And so that is an incredible scale of decline of union density over the second half of the 20th century and up to now, and I talk about union density a lot, and it's not a measurement that you hear people talk about a lot. It's not really on the news a lot. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's one of the best measurements of sort of the health of the working class, and I think of American society in general. And turning around that decline of union density in this country is one of the most productive things that we could possibly do, not just for, hey, let's have strong unions, but like a whole world of positive, social and economic measurements will flow from increasing that union density. And when you talk about the Biden administration, it's interesting because he is in many ways a very, very pro-union president, probably the best, that the labor movement has had, at least in my lifetime and possibly longer. And, we've had 4 years of Biden. And what did union density do during that time? It went down by almost a full point during the 4 years of the Biden administration. So, the labor movement needs to take that as a wake-up call and be like, our salvation is not going to be from the White House. Our salvation has to be from organizing millions of working people.
Can you talk about that dynamic, about how union density went down? I mean, what are the drivers? Obviously, the pandemic was a major upheaval in the workforce, and a million people died in this country. And don't know if people don't like to remember that, but that actually did happen. I mean, can you take us through, I guess, the past 4 years and why that happened, despite Biden's posture towards unions?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, union density going down is the norm, right? Union density has been going down for 60 to 70 years. And I compare it to climate change a lot because it's a really slow moving disaster where it goes down a little bit every year, a little bit. Every year union density will go down by maybe like 0.5 percentage point. sometimes it'll go up a little bit, but in the long term, it goes down and down and down. So really what we've seen even during the Biden administration is the continuation of this long-term trend, which is reflective of, you know, first of all, the horrible anti-union labor laws in this country that make it very hard to organize at scale. Ever since the Taft-Hartley Act passed in 1947, it's been very difficult in terms of American labor law to organize workers at large scale. And so that's what the PRO Act is about. Biden didn't pass the PRO Act, and, you know, the PRO Act will never pass as long as we have the filibuster. So that's the reality. We can't, you know, so the labor movement has to say, in this context of the labor laws we have today, you know, how can we put more resources into organizing, into creating new union members at a level that will stop that decline of union density? And unfortunately, existing unions today don't necessarily prioritize new organizing. You know, it's hard. They work so hard on trying to win things for their existing members, which is, of course, important. But we also need the labor movement to take a step back and say, look, you know, if we do not turn around this decline of union density, we're going into single digits. And, you know, so, I mean, Biden, look, there's a great NLRB. The federal government was not persecuting unions during the Biden administration as it does during Republican administrations. And so what's missing is the resources and the dedication from unions themselves to do new organizing at a really large scale.
Was that also a function of certain smaller unionization efforts that didn't have the heft of these major national unions behind them being crushed by companies like Amazon and Starbucks during this time period, even with the NLRB being more pro-labor? The problem is it's asymmetrical warfare. They don't give a shit if they get fined. They're just going to keep doing it because it's much more lucrative of them to violate labor law. To prevent unionization, and it just is that part of the system is broken. It's not punitive enough.
Yeah, it's absolutely broken, and you know you hit it on the head, because it is actually rational for companies to break labor law in this country. You know, it is rational for companies to do illegal things and fire workers who try to organize and union bust in illegal ways, because the penalties are so weak. You know, in many cases, the penalties take years to be litigated, and then it's like you hang a notice in the break room, and that's what it is. So of course, all these companies are just going to break the law and persecute people and retaliate against workers. And so, you know, that is how the labor laws in this country are screwed up. And it is always going to be asymmetric warfare. And until we can get to the point politically where we can pass something like the PRO Act, which is always going to be filibustered by every Republican, because it's a meaningful reform of those kind of laws and establishing real penalties and making it work, you know, easier for unions to organize and easier for them to exercise strike power and other things. You know, we have to be realistic about where we are. If we can't reform the labor laws, then we have to operate in this environment. And that primarily means spending a shitload more money on organizing, because even in the bad set of labor laws that we have, you can still organize, you know, and you see a campaign like Starbucks, which was incredibly hard fought and took a lot of political will and took a lot of, you know, work from lots of organizers and a lot of workers, but, you know, they succeeded and they're going to get their contract eventually. And so it can be done, you know, we just have to do it.
What do you make of some unions? I mean, obviously we saw with the Teamsters and their not kind of the non-endorsement and all that, and the controversy that engendered. But you know, I saw there was a Jacobin poll of within the context of the election that Harris has lost support in Pennsylvania, in particular among union members, and there was some criticism of that poll because it's also in Pennsylvania, union members are a lot whiter than in the other swing states. And so there's another factor there, in my view, that isn't necessarily, you know, the racism element. But it is true that the Democrats are trending in this direction of basically being so stratified in terms of their voter base and of like college educated versus non-college educated people, and it's that gap has widened every election cycle since the Obama coalition. That presents problems, and there's a chasm in between, you know, the more pro-labor administrative stuff that the Democrats are doing and the voting bloc that they're courting. What does that mean for the labor movement?
Yeah, it's a real thing, and it's a real thing, you know, to be concerned about. I think there's a few threads to it. I think part of it is the Democratic Party itself, you know, moving in that direction towards the more college educated direction and you know, frankly, corporate friendly direction. But of course, you know, there's also the fact that you're just losing the support of working class people. And when you think about it from the perspective of union members, part of it, I think, is that, again, you know, not to be a broken record, but we're not organizing new union members. And the portion of union members in America who are going to be the most attuned to the consequences of labor law and the consequences of policies are going to be those people who are trying to organize, you know, and who are actively engaged in those fights. And so if the labor movement is not doing a lot of new organizing, there's not a huge percentage of union members who are necessarily going to be tuned in to all the political consequences of these things, you know? So again, I think it comes back to organizing on behalf of the unions. And also, you know, it tells you that if you have union members who are voting for Donald Trump, you know, one thing that you can say for sure is like their identity as a union member is not that important to them, you know, because if they really cherish that, you know, identity as a union member and they took that as a very important thing in their life, they could not vote for Donald Trump. I mean, on a policy level, there is no comparison. And so it tells you that, you know, a lot of people have lost touch with their unions. You know, even union members are not really engaged in and participating in their unions. And, you know, that again is a wake up call for the unions themselves that, hey, you can't just organize people and send them a contract and send them on their way. Like, good unions are very engaged with their membership always, and they're always doing political education. They're always talking to their workers, and they're having town halls. And, you know, you have to do that stuff constantly as a union to keep those people from sliding into the arms of somebody like Donald Trump.
Do you attribute that to the lack of union density? Like, it would be a more robust infrastructure to kind of draw people in to being a union member as like a driving political force for them if the unions were more robust?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, if you hang out with a lot of union people, one thing you definitely see consistently is that the people who have newly organized their unions tend to be like the most excited and the most radical in some ways because they've just been through a fight, you know? Everybody who has just organized a union has seen union busting up close. They've seen retaliation from the boss.
You
know?
Yourself at Gawker, right? I mean,
yes,
if you want to talk about that, feel free.
I mean, we unionized Gawker, and the company went bankrupt and was sold out of bankruptcy to Univision, and they were a little bit worse of an owner. And then we got sold to a private equity firm that really hated the union and didn't want to negotiate, and you know, shut down my site, laid me off, and eventually those people who are still there had to go on strike. So, you know, this is a common experience of people in all types of industries who unionize and take a seat at the table and suddenly, you know, are engaged in this fight with the boss. And I really, you know, I tell people on the left, on the political left, like, you want to teach people about like socialism and Marxism and these things. It's not about reading a book, you know, let them go through a union campaign and let them try to negotiate a union contract at their job, and they will understand perfectly, you know, class power and class war and all that stuff. So again, like, if you are not putting a lot of people, and, you know, by a lot, I mean hundreds of thousands of people per year or millions of people per year in America at large through that process, you know, you do kind of lack some of that radicalism that goes along with that. And when you look at labor history, you know, you go back 100 years, they were getting shot at with machine guns and stuff trying to get their unions. So that's a natural level of radicalism that you don't have to teach people out of book. They understand the class war up close and personal.
And so you profile a lot of union leaders in your book. You start off with the great Sarah Nelson, the president of the Association of Flight Attendants in the AFL-CIO. She's somebody we've long, admired here on the show, and has, I think she's been on the show, right? Sarah Nelson has been on the show. Either way, she's been, despite the fact that their section of the union, I think, is relatively small. She's wielded her power really effectively as president. Can you just talk a little bit about her and her example?
Yeah, I followed her throughout the book. You're right. She's in a union. The Association of Flight Attendants is the union that she's the president of, and it's only about 50,000 people in the union, which is a relatively small union by national standards. But she is a person who kind of has a gift for being a great spokesperson for her union. She's a great speaker. She's a true progressive. She's like a fiery person. When you see her speak, you get excited by hearing her. And that's a quality that, we need in the labor movement. We need people who will go on television and talk about unions to regular people. It's important actually that regular people turn on CNN and see somebody there being like, unions, hey, you got problems? Think about unions. That stuff is important. And so
Sean Fain's been phenomenal in that regard as well.
Is another person who's incredible doing that. So those people, I write in the book about Sarah Nelson trying to kind of grapple with the idea of how do you become a leader of the labor movement? Not just my own union, but how do we elevate this to the national stage? And it's not easy because the labor movement is very disparate and made up of a lot of different things. And she is, I will say, her union is currently trying to organize 28,000 flight attendants at Delta, which is the biggest non-union airline. So that's one of the biggest organizing campaigns in America today. And, so they're living it.
And another story of yours from the book that struck me is the story of Felix Allen. Can you talk a little bit about that story?
Yeah, Felix Allen is a young guy. He's about 26 years old, lives in New Orleans, and worked at a Lowe's hardware store. And Lowe's is the second biggest hardware chain in America after Home Depot. It's a $100 billion company. There are no labor unions at any Lowe's. And Felix Allen, who's just this guy, decided that he wanted to unionize his Lowe's hardware store where he worked in New Orleans, and really single-handedly printed up union cards and went to work and got people to sign them and filed for a union election and got a union election at Lowe's, which is an incredibly hard and important thing to do. And I write about in the book, how once he did this, the corporate union busters came in and the anti-union teams came in and the team of lawyers came in and they sort of crushed this nascent union drive that he was doing, and how the labor movement didn't have our own team. The company will always send in a union busting team in that situation. And there was no pro-union team that could parachute in to help this young man succeed in this union election. So ultimately, he lost. But I think thinking about why we can't match the power of union busters is a really important thing that the labor movement has to grapple with. And, he's a great guy. When I went to New Orleans to do a book event, Felix Allen was going to come, but he ended up getting arrested that day at a Palestine protest. So that's the kind of guy he is.
That was a question I wanted to get to later, but I guess since we're already there, to talk about how recently the unions have been demanding an arms embargo. It's some people may be like, why do they care, right? But this is so important for the labor movement in terms of, as you say, the role in American democracy. Foreign policy has never been more. I mean, it's always been in smoke-filled rooms, but it's really disconnected from public opinion, frankly, in ways that I think are concerning. Obviously, the genocide in Gaza is one of the worst crimes in the history of humanity already, and so the fact that unions are using their power to make themselves clear on this front, what do you make of that? And can you explain to some people that may not see that connection why it's a key mechanism for labor to flex its power over?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the ideals of the labor movement and what it stands for, it's workers of the world unite. I mean, the kind of basic insight of the whole labor movement is like, we are all the same. All the workers of the world are the same, and solidarity is our power. We are powerful when we stand together, and we all have to look out for each other. That is the basic insight of the labor movement. And so when you see the workers of Palestine being killed and bombed and these huge injustices going on. I mean, they blew up the Labor Federation headquarters in Palestine, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
And so the unions of America have been pretty good on this. I've actually been heartened to see a lot, or even most of the biggest unions, so not just the small left-wing unions who are always kind of in a good place, but the big unions, the teachers unions, the SEIU, and all these unions have really come out and called for a ceasefire, called for an end to this. And, people will say that unions should stay in the workplace, but that's always been a way to try to marginalize the power of working class people and to say kind of like, shut up and stay in your place. And the fact that the labor movement has stood up on this issue has been good. Now the only thing we're lacking is really any response from the White House, from the most pro-union president in history. This is a conspicuous place where he is not listening to the unions at all.
Well, if we're ranking in terms of his actual ideology, Zionism he did bust the strike for the rail workers, so
yeah, it's a low bar, but yeah, right. It turns out he likes Zionism more than he likes unions.
Lastly, you also write about the care workers and care workers and their organizing. And it's important. What's interesting is that, Harris has some ties with SEIU, and I'm cautiously optimistic that could be included in some of the proposals that she's put forward. It remains to be seen. And of course, she has to win first. But, when people talk about union members or laborers, there's often this stereotype. It's like, you got to have grease on your face and you've got to be wearing a hard hat. And it's usually a white guy when, honestly, our national press talks about union members. And it's just not the case. There are workers of all shapes and sizes and races working in a variety of different fields who constitute union members. And the Care Workers Union and their organizing has been really effective. If you could just talk a little bit about that part of your book.
Yeah, I have a chapter in the book about a 20-year-long campaign by SEIU and the domestic workers to unionize all of the in-home childcare workers in the state of California, which is 40,000, mostly women of color, many, many immigrants from all over the world, who are people who take care of kids in their home and are paid by the state of California, to take care of low-income children in their own homes. And they spent 20 years, first of all, changing the state law to allow this group to unionize legally, and then, in fact, organizing this group of 40,000 workers across the state, all these different places, all these different languages. And they did it, and they got a union contract. They've actually signed their second union contract by now. And it's really kind of an amazing and heartening story of what can be done when the labor movement has this broad vision and sticks with it for years and years and years. And, the future of America, as you say, the stereotypical union member in people's minds should probably be a woman of color today, because that's the reality of where organized labor is going, and this country is getting old. Those care economy jobs that people talk about, home care and child care and all those things are the places where job growth is growing the most in this country. And SEIU in particular has been really aggressive about trying to think of ways to organize these groups of workers that are not traditional, workers all in a single workplace. And it's a big priority for them. And it's going to be important for this country, to have those jobs be living wage jobs, because we don't all want our parents being taken care of by people making $12 an hour and living in poverty. That's not who you want taking care of your elderly mother. And so,
well, tell that to Gavin Newsom, who vetoed protections for care workers in California. I'll never forget that. What an unbelievable scumbag.
Yeah, anybody with that greaseback haircut is not to be trusted, in my opinion. But
or someone married to Kimberly Guilfoyle back in the day. There's a lot of red flags.
Yeah. But SEIU gives, a couple $100 million to the Harris campaign. And so they are going to have, I think, a strong voice if she's elected. And hopefully part of that is making it legally easier to organize these groups of care workers all over the country.
Absolutely. Well, Hamilton Nolan, thanks so much for your time. The book is called The Hammer, Power, Inequality, and the Struggle for the Soul of Labor. We will put a link to that in the description down below, wherever you're listening to or watching this. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. All right, guys. We are going to wrap up the free part of this program with another campaign event. I'm breaking format a little bit here. We didn't get a second guest because I thought I may go along with Hamilton, and that book is really great. People should read it. And if you have any labor skeptical family, you can get a passive-aggressive Christmas gift for them, or a Hanukkah gift, or holiday gift, or whatever. It's I love giving passive-aggressive gifts to my family in the form of books that I need them to read. It's a hallmark of.
Like what, for example?
I gave out a bunch of Rashid Khalidi books last Christmas time. My dad read the whole thing, front to cover, and he's become great. Once you start reading about that topic, it's just
it's pretty night and day.
And
you can just kind of look at the covers of, we've talked about this before, but every Israel book's the most misunderstood little nation on earth, and that could. And every book, from I guess I would say, maybe some would say a Palestinian perspective, I would just say a realistic perspective is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine and the 7 Years War and the Iron Wall and stuff like that.
Right. Although in that regard, the Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates is another great option this holiday season.
And check out patreon.com/Left Reckoning, because I'll be reviewing that for members of the show this weekend. I read that last weekend. It's his best, and I think I've read all of Ta-Nehisi's books. It's definitely my favorite.
I will be listening to that. I also should read that book soon.
It's digestible too. It's a shorter book.
He's a good writer. There's a reason he gets a lot of praise. But let's cover this Trump Univision thing before we go into the fun half. So we played the Harris interview with Bret Baier on Fox News. That was pretty tense and adversarial. Trump, for his part, was doing a Univision town hall. Harris did this a few days ago, last week, something like that. And here a farmer asks Trump about his deportation plans. This man is named Jorge Velasquez. He's 64 years old. He's a farmer himself. And with Trump talking about these mass deportations and rounding up migrants in this country to kick them out of the country, this man here asked him a pretty simple question. How is farm work going to continue? How are these workers who do a lot of the labor in this country under the cloak of secrecy, really, because they're undocumented, how is that going to affect the industry? How is that going to affect my work? And honestly, just Trump's callousness in this response here says everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Trump. Thank you, Diana. Muchas gracias. President Trump, as you know, farming is one of the most demanding jobs, and farmers like Jorge Velasquez over here work hard to put food on the table of American families. He has a question for you. Jorge Velasquez es agricultor y tiene una pregunta.
Good hair, yeah, by the way. Nice hair. Look at that.
Buenas noches, señor presidente Trump. He trabajado toda mi vida con estas manos, agachado por horas, piscando fresa, cortando brócoli.
Good evening, President Trump. For many years, I have worked with these hands, hunched over, picking strawberries and cutting broccoli.
Este duro trabajo es realizado en su mayoría por gente indocumentada.
This tough job is mainly done by undocumented people.
Si usted deporta a esta gente, ¿quién haría ese trabajo ¿Y qué precio pagaríamos por la comida?
If you deport these people, who would do that job, and what price would we pay for food?
Please. Finished, yes?
Yes.
So the problem we have is we had people coming in under my administration, and they were coming in legally. They were coming in through a system that we had, which was great, because I'm the best thing that ever happened to farmers. You know that. I was great. You know, farmers are doing very badly right now, very, very badly under this administration. Under my administration, farmers did very well. We have to have a lot of people come into our country. We just want them to come in legally through a system, because they've released hundreds of thousands of people that are murderers, drug dealers, terrorists. They're coming in totally, nobody knows who they are, where they come from. And the people that are most against it are the Hispanic people. They are totally against it, what's happened. The other thing I can say is that a lot of the jobs that you have and that other people have are being taken by these people that are coming in. And the African-American population and the Hispanic population in particular are losing jobs now because millions of people are coming in. So they're coming in, but they're also coming in largely, and tremendous numbers coming in out of mental institutions. They're emptying out mental institutions. They're emptying out insane asylums. That's a step above a mental institution. Worse, bigger problems, bigger problem people. They're emptying out jails. Their jails are being let into our country from Venezuela, but not just South America. From all over the world, they're being let in. From jails, from nobody's ever seen anything like it. The jail population throughout the world has come way down, and it's all coming into the United States of America. So we want workers, and we want them to come in, but they have to come in legally. They have to love our country. They have to love you, love our people. The problem with this administration is they've totally lost control. It's the worst president and the worst vice president that we've ever had in this country. What they have done to our country in terms of hurting it. Our farmers, by the way, are dying. They haven't had anything so bad in 25 years. 4 years ago, our farmers, including you, were making a lot of money. They were doing great.
All right, whatever. I mean, honestly, he's just, first of all, he looks like shit. That's my aesthetic point about like what the hell is going on.
What's going on with that?
He
cadaver makeup.
He keeps canceling all these events, and I mean, after that 39-minute swaying around on stage, I think a lot of people are starting to rightly ask, like, he's always been unwell. But how unwell is he now? Just something to observe. And
how unwell will he be in 4 years if hypothetically he wins this election?
And it's just so around 50% of the labor workforce, farm workforce in this country are undocumented workers. And that man there said, "I've been doing hard work, back-breaking work my entire life. And I work alongside all of these people. What is your plan for, first of all, if you just want to be, you don't care about the humanity of undocumented people in this country, and you just want to make a straight economic point, mass deportations targeting undocumented workers in this country would decimate the farm industry in the same way that, by the way, Trump's ideas for tariffs would be horrible for many industries. The auto one is the one he's talking about most, but also farmers as well. So just from a pure economic standpoint, this would be a disaster. But it's just like when that man stands in front of you and says, "I've been doing backbreaking work my whole life," you're going to mass deport people I work with? What's it going to do? And he goes into bragging about himself and talking about how they're emptying people from insane asylums into this country. He's just...
Trump knows
he's just a horrible person. There's not much else to say.
Trump knows how hard undocumented people work because he has exploited undocumented labor. He does it on his golf courses and properties. Mm-hmm. He did so at the famous Trump Tower, where he used undocumented Polish workers to clear out asbestos.
Yeah.
Some of them getting cancer later in the line, to the point where they had to threaten to kill the guy, hang the guy that was their liaison, and Trump threatened them with deportation services. So when we hear these things about like, so he can't address that guy as a farm worker. He has to be like, so you have farmers like you. But when we talk about farmers and like say the bigger capitalists, why do they support this even though it would destroy their business? It's the same reason Trump does, because Trump also knows that he's not going to be able to trim the hedges at the Trump places without that. But it is useful to have something like ICE there, because if those workers start getting uppity and start saying, I'm demanding, say, like a day off or a water break, or I'm going to complain, it's like, well, we'll just get you the F out of here. That's what this is all about. So yeah, Trump can't speak to the worker because and look, there will be I think deportations if Trump wins, because and that will set the example that the rest of the capitalists want, which is like the ones that don't get deported, that are still being exploited by our capitalists. They are going to be extra. They're going to be extra on the DL and not complaining. And that's what this is about. This is about labor, and this is not about protecting jobs for black people, because now all of a sudden the black people are going to go to South Dakota and help harvest corn or whatever. Like that's insincere, and anyone who thinks that Trump is sincere about like black jobs or Latino jobs, for instance, like we should be doing more as a federal government for communities impacted by large migration flows, and a large part of that is like border communities. Those are $100,000 jobs. Those don't come everywhere. The same reason like why police are popular among certain groups. It's like those are some of the best jobs for people without having gone through college, or for instance, like. This is a material issue.
And you're exactly on point about this. We have so many layers of leverage that capitalists, bosses, use over their employees, and those are often the hardest institutions to break apart. I mean, the private health insurance industry is one of them. Health insurance and healthcare coming through your employment is a big piece of that as well. But our immigration system being broken, right? It's not broken for people who want to exploit their labor, because as Matt says, these are points of leverage. If you want to ask for more money, you want to ask for more money from me, I'm going to call ICE on your ass.
Yep, exactly.
You want to complain about the fact that your 14-year-old's hand got mangled in this like equipment that we're using to slice up meat
at 4 a.m. in the morning,
as he's working at 4 a.m. in the morning? Why don't I call ICE on your ass?
Yep.
That's exactly what this is.
And it's so insincere, because they'll say like, because most Americans, and even the way they message us, like they're not racist, and they don't have the demographic anxiety that is really animating a lot of this too. And so like when you say like, a lot of them are criminals. Well, that's what they have to go to, because the actual numbers with regards to jobs and stuff are not clear at all. You can look at this very closely. There's been lots of studies on immigration and the effect that it has on the economy, and generally it's positive. And to the extent that there's any sort of undercutting, you know what the solution for that is labor protections and empowering labor.
Exactly.
So like it's not just keeping people out. So yeah, it's pretty wild. And again, it's shame on the Democrats, because this should be American. The fucking Statue of Liberty, I see it every time I go to Manhattan. Like immigration is a good thing for this country. We should stop causing, like when he mentions Venezuela, it's like, oh, I wonder what happened to Venezuela. For instance, like the number one export oil. Did we have anything to do with the collapse of that industry with like our policy?
Or the Haitian migrants that he's targeted with his racist conspiracy
Both
theories.
examples of American collective punishment. And then we're like, well, why are they coming here? Well, you break it, you buy it.
And we are on the verge of other more a greater need for mass migration as a result of capitalism and American empire in the form of climate change. We will be seeing climate migration all across the world for this very reason. And the global south will be affected more than us in the north. And to your point, just to wrap this up about like his claim that these are criminals, the freaking Cato Institute did a fact check on his 13,000 murderers or whatever, and it's a lie that they're being unleashed from asylums and prisons. It is a lie. It's a lie, and he keeps repeating it. And so anyway, it just is like to see that guy ask him in earnest about the dignity of his work or his industry, and to have him respond like that. I mean, it's just a good example of who this dude is.
And like, it's crazy. Like, and farmers like you, he didn't say he was a farmer.
No.
He said he was a farm worker.
Really cool says the farm worker asked a totally legit question. If you deport undocumented workers, what will happen to food prices? I mean, that's a part of it. Yes.
Black people will just
I mean, it's the same thing with his tariff policy. It's nonsensical.
Yeah.
That's part of why, like, the business press is now more pro-Harris. And that's a part of, like, why he's losing ground on the numbers with the economy. And it's been clearly the campaign strategy. I don't know if that makes me feel great, but he's not moving away from this tariff thing. So,
right. Well, yeah, the corporate imperative to like strengthen the deportation thing, like they've kind of already did it. like if I'm one of these companies, it's like we've done this for so long. How much before we can just exploit these workers again under the new regime that we've set up, where both parties are like, yeah, this is a huge crisis we got to solve.
Exactly. All right, folks. With that, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program and head into the fun half, where we will take your calls, read your IMs, all that good stuff. As a reminder, your support is what makes this show possible. Join themajorityreport.com. Please support our show. Become a member and you can IM the show. I'll read your IMs. That's what we do here. All that good stuff. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, Left Reckoning, Sunday. I'm going to talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates' new book, which I read over the weekend. I think there's a lot interesting in it. I mean, particularly the Palestine stuff, which is very heavily, I think, influenced by Nur Erakat, who he cites. But overall, just a really, I think, important book, and one that it's interesting to hear him assess, like, sort of the case for reparations and how that got through the Atlantic editorial system. And he talks about being a young writer, and noticeably, the Atlantic editors didn't flag anything about the use of Israel as an example of great reparations, and he sort of contends with like realizing like, I
was lied to. That's what he said to Ezra Klein.
I was empowered to be at this major institution, but you can't just rely on that sort of thing. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm definitely going to read the book too. No ESPN this week because Bradley's out. On Monday, I think Matt is going to be guest hosting.
Oh, yeah. I'm talking about 3 hours on NBA.
Yes, we will talk about the NBA. We've been in NFL world for ESPN, but we'll have Matt on. It'll be a great time. And then Bradley's back for our regular Thursday OT show next week, but not this week. We're off this week. Do we have Brandon and Binder?
I don't see either of them, so I'll put out the bat signal for them.
They're late, just like Kamala Harris, disrespecting the institution of Fox.
We have to turn this around. Oh, and
Brandon, like clockwork, comes in. There he is. Hey, Brandon. Hello. Oh,
let me see here.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
There we go.
Hey.
I'm taking Hamilton's
hello.
off there.
Hey, Brandon, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I am doing well. What's happening on the discourse?
Yes, we will have an episode out for our lovely fans over on our Patreon with a bit of a news roundup from the last few weeks where we have not had an episode. And we will be having a stream sometime soon to watch some fun clips as well. You know, a clips extravaganza. You know, if you like watching clips, especially if you like watching clips with me, you know, you're going to be full. So,
all right.
What can you say?
All right. Check it out. And we'll be joined by Matt Binder soon, but check out Doomed, Scam Economy, Leftist Mafia. He's a busy man, that Matt Binder. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the phone half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the Majority Report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
Yeah, I think you need to take over for Sam. Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour? Sushi and poker with the boys. Was offered a tour.
Yeah.
Sushi and poker with the boys. What? Tour. Sushi and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys. Was offered a tour. Sushi and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour. Sushi and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. You shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour.
Wow.
Sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
So was offered a tour.
Yeah.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I had this debate 7,000 times. A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing.
Real thing. What's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's
a tour.
A real thing. That's real thing.
Real thing. What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing. That's
poker with the boys. That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Tour. Sushi and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour.
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks game, right?
Now, shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best.
Pilot tour.
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't binge. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is, so I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh,
sorry.
She wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
Back.
We are back, and it is the fun half of the Majority Report, folks. Opening up the phone lines now. 646-257-3920. Solidarity from Norway says, are you going to Norway for your honeymoon? I am not. I've actually, but you could go to see the Vigeland Park in Oslo. I don't buy that you're Finnish, by the way. I am both Norwegian and Finnish. I know that there is a Vigeland Park in Oslo. My cousins have been. But I've never been to Norway. I have been to Finland because I still have a bunch of family there. My grandmother came over from Finland when she was 19. So all of her siblings are still there, and some of them are still alive. So I am Finnish. I'm sorry that you don't buy it, but perhaps I'll provide my long form birth certificate or something like that. Maybe that'll make it clear to you. Okay, what was I? Bears for JFK Jr. I think you folks need to put together a Majority Report book list for the holidays. Books to buy for your relatives. I have already bought 4 copies of The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, though depending on the result in November, maybe I need to get a few copies of William Allen's The Nazi Seizure of Power as well. Oh boy. But,
check out Pape's book on lobbying is the big one, but there's a short one that he just came out with, a very short history of Israel, Palestine, something like that. But it's much shorter and very digestible.
10 Myths About Israel?
No, it's even more recent.
More recent?
Yep.
But that's a short one. 10 Myths About Israel from Pape that's very digestible for people. What What's some other ones? I mean, again, if your family members are more liberal, Coates's book is perfect for that. And we're gonna play some clips of him, I think, on Ezra Klein as well in just a bit. Let's take a call, shall we? Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh my goodness! Hey, this is El Canipcion from San Antonio. How you doing?
El Canipcion from San Antonio, frequent IMer, friend of the show. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm holding it down. Breaking away from work, and I'm gonna get off the headphones and on my phone.
Very much appreciate
one
that.
Sec.
All right.
Give me. Hey.
Hey.
I'm in the work truck.
All right. Awesome. You sound very clear now.
Yeah, it's awesome. This is an interesting thing for me to be calling on. I guess I'll just lay it out. Did you are you guys like comfortable talking about Ethan Klein at all? Like, I have some. I want
Sure.
to.
To be honest, I don't know anything about this situation except that I guess
he's mad at Hassan or something.
he's pro-Israel.
Yeah, we don't really follow him that close, but we're happy. What's your question?
He was lovely to us during that thing with Crowder, but I mean, obviously, I don't know what the specifics are of what he's saying about Israel, but I mean, if he's a Zionist,
Sure.
we have big disagreements. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do, before I kind of describe what's going on, he's taking a lot of issue with the fact that people are calling him Zionist, and I can understand that. And listen, like, I'm a Gentile. I'm just a high school educated idiot, but I've followed, Majority Report since, 2019, thoroughly got in with Michael Brooks, rest in power to him. And here I am with, I've been a fan of H3 since you guys collaborated with him and got into him through you guys. And so I just say that to put some asterisks that, I'm not the most brilliant person to discuss this culture, but I am somebody who's followed just a lot of what he's been agitating about regularly over the past year. Mm-hmm. And, I can understand the, some Jewish folks' concern about the conflation of Zionism with Judaism and certain people who are not exactly Zionist in politics being described as such. I do believe that can be an anti-Semitic slur at times. My issue I'm taking place with him is that he has extensely described his politics on the matter of Israel that the people who went there in the 40s wanted to create a safe Jewish homeland then. And I can understand that, but, the thing is they went there with the idea to, displace and ethnically cleanse the people. And in this day, I mean, Ethan will often say that, he does not support the government, but, the people there the public has entrenched their support for Netanyahu since the war started, the genocide started, as well as, and even more since the invasion of Lebanon. So, you do have to worry about the fact that the people of Israel are supporting this. So I say all that to say, the fact that he has described his politics at length, I just do not believe that it is disingenuous to describe his politics as Zionist, because he
of course
is, yes, he's failing to question the fundamental founding myths of it.
So I just sent a chart in Slack, Matt. This was from a poll from ABC. I guess it was a week ago at this point. Just to back up your point about the Israeli public, and like he's like, I don't like the government. If a Zionist saying they don't like the government, it's fundamentally incorrect to talk about the Israeli public, frankly, as separate from the government that they support. I mean, Netanyahu has been in power. He was briefly out of power, but basically for 2 decades. And the public there is increasingly more supportive of him. Like there was all this talk because there were protests in Tel Aviv where there's a more liberal Zionist bent because it's an urban area that they're gonna oust Netanyahu and all of this kind of stuff. And in fact, with the war in Lebanon and the genocide in Gaza, he solidified his position, and that doesn't take into account the people all outside of the urban centers in Israel who are the most radical settlers. And that's where this base of support comes from. And it's this it's a myth.
Settler colonial it's an ethnocracy that has been formed through violent expulsion of people who would maybe vote a different way.
Right.
So like I don't really care much about, just like looking back at like say, the votes in Minnesota 150 years ago would have been supportive of removing the Native Americans. Like this is why we talk about settler colonialism and why we don't support sort of manufacturing demographic majorities where there aren't ones.
The entire context of the Israeli government is the occupation, the expansion of territory, and they have social services for Jewish Israelis, but it's an apartheid system, and then on the outskirts of it, it's a genocidal expansion of settler colonial system. And so, like, this is a chart that ABC had this poll of the Israeli public. Just to put it in the U.S. context, 58% believe that Trump would be better for Israel's security. 20% think Harris would be. 24% say they support Harris, and 54% say they support Trump. So what are we talking about here? That tracks exactly with the support for Netanyahu.
What we're talking about is delusions of liberal Zionists who don't want to realize what team they're on. And the truth is they are closer to Smotrich and those guys on this issue than they are to anyone who cares about ending killing or innocent civilian human lives. And everything is trying to like obscure that fact. And that's fundamentally what it is.
And I know I've been talking a lot, but just to wrap up this point from my end, if he takes issue with being called a Zionist, it's not a term that is just for Jewish people. That's a complete misnomer. Joe Biden, I mean, I would ask Ethan this. Joe Biden has repeatedly declared himself to be a Zionist. The entire Republican Party is filled with Christian Zionists. Zionism, anti-Semites. And Zionism at its outset, when we had Ilan Pappé on the October 7th anniversary, was talking about, the Christian Zionist roots going back to the turn of the century, really in the 1880s. There were already being plans before it was supposed to be a Jewish state. Christian Zionists had their aims on colonizing Palestine.
Christopher Columbus said he wanted to take back Jerusalem from the Muslims because if people remember at that time, that was a big issue, was Muslim Spain and Moors and stuff like that. So yeah, this Zionism thing is a Christian, I mean, if not invention, definitely like a product brought to market.
Yeah. Sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I would add is that, like, you might theoretically, in theory, be able to disaggregate Zionism as a offshoot of Jewish identity from the state of Israel. But especially once you put into the context, and by Zionism, I mean the belief that Jewish people are deserving and should have their own, like, national state, which is debatable to begin with, right? Should we ever have, like, an ethno-nationalist state is something that I think we're on the left
debatable.
Disagree with, because regardless of what the ethno-national, like what the nationality at the core is, it increasingly becomes likely that you engage in politics that are, exclusionary of other groups, or at the best and at worst, like oppressive of other groups. So we as leftists can't support that. But once you entangle it with Israel and Israel's actions specifically, and it's like no longer about a theoretical Jewish state, but about the state of Israel, I think it's totally, open to criticism, right? Because we're not talking about just the belief. They're trying to, paper over the fact that we're talking about what's working in practice right now, which, ultimately, like I said about ethno-nationalism in general, we could have guessed would work in practice if someone described an ethno-nationalist state. But certainly what we're seeing is a genocide born out of Western colonial beliefs that has had Jewish identity papered over it to act as like a shield from criticism, because a lot of this stuff are just things that we've seen come from just generally Western powers engaging in colonial projects in Africa, in Australia, in, you know, the Americas. And the only difference here is that there is a different reference for what justifies that genocide and that colonialism. Because the people who left to settle America, they would have told you they were religiously oppressed in Europe too.
Oh yeah,
you know, they would have said the exact same thing. And
we colonized the United States with religious justifications. I mean, Manifest Destiny and Zionism are identical in the way that they like view colonization through a religious supremacist
and religious persecution. Like it's trite, but hurt people sort of thing. Where the like Huguenots and all the different sort of settler colonials. Like when and America was trying to populate this country, they looked specifically to those sorts of groups because they could bring a lot of people over in an orderly fashion. Frankly.
Right.
Also, one last point. The dynamic of trying to like to distance yourself as a citizen of a country from the actions of the government is one that should also be familiar to people in America, because that's something that becomes a very big talking point regarding why
I want to pick up on that if I can.
Okay, well, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, Brandon. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
Yeah, I appreciate you greatly making that point, because the thing is, what Ethan, there is a fundamentally parasocial issue going on here, because a lot of this is like the split of Hassan and Ethan, and I'm, you know, you guys are doing outstanding, setting the playing field here, and on that point that Brandon makes, you know, disambiguating, you know, the government from the individual people. Like, unfortunately, the culture there is largely, in Israel, is largely bloodthirsty and genocidal. But the thing is, like, the fear about, you know, that regular Israelis are being called Zionists or whatever, I think is a little unfounded. Because the thing is, like, I would just say, like, people of the left, at least, speaking for people of the left, like myself, would have an understanding that these people are, you know, there's a lot of, like, consent manufactured for them, for the government to continue this genocidal project. And I would just say people calling for the downfall of the Zionist project, you know, we need to make every effort we can to stomp out anti-Semitism in the movement. But the issue is, I don't think the people that want to end the Zionist project want to hurt the average Israeli citizen even.
We want racial integration. This is the framing that is helpful, I think, for liberals in the United States. Tear down the apartheid wall. There should be a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, and have Palestinians and Israelis living side by side. And if someone has a visceral reaction to that and thinks that that's unfair, or, oh no, it would no longer be a Jewish state, I want them to answer, why are you opposed to racial integration? Because we know that Palestinians came from the land that was once Israel. You don't even need to go into the ethnic cleansing piece. Yes, there I think should be at least some understanding that Palestinians live there, unless you're so far gone that you believe it was an empty land.
Without a people, yeah.
Yeah, but I think, you know,
I have a quick
liberal Zionists wouldn't go that far. So then just basically ask them that basic question. But we got to jump in a sec, El Knipsion, so really quickly.
No, I'll go ahead and jump. I didn't need, at some point I'll probably call back and mention more of the specifics of what's going on between Hassan and Ethan, but we'll just keep it brief.
We love Hassan, and, you know, overall Ethan seems like a good guy. I mean, just there's a lot of people that have blind spots on this, and
the proximity to power is just so distant here. So I think that's like, I think people, Ethan's not understanding that people of the left are like often in his audience and being charitable to him in ways that he is not seeing, because I think he's leading with his identity and his feelings and transposing them to a broader world political conflict that is just, it's malpractice and shouldn't be going on. So
appreciate the
thank you very much. I'll go ahead and thanks, guys. Have a good day.
You too. And we say hello to Matt Binder now. Hello. Doing well. Brandon, did you... Lots to discuss.
Don't worry, we got about 25 more minutes of this topic.
Yeah,
so.
totally. Brandon, did you want to say something? I felt like you were teeing up to say something, and then maybe I cut you off.
No, we can move. I'm sure it'll come back up.
Oh yes, well, we will be talking more Zionism. Let's just jump right into this. I think here, Matt, did you? We're good on. Okay, yeah, I see it now. So, Ta-Nehisi Coates went on Ezra Klein's show with the New York Times. And
sorry, we reset there for a second. Binder, there was an issue with your audio that we have cleared up. So anybody who couldn't hear Binder, you'll be able to hear Binder now.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
Binder.
All I did was say a witty line about how I missed quite the topic, but then Emma said we'll talk about it a lot more. That's all you missed. I didn't say
that's
much.
all you missed. Well, good reminder though. What's happening on Doom's Scam Economy?
Don't worry about it. I was late. YouTube.com/Matt Binder. Check out whatever's up there. And then tonight, Leftist Mafia. You'll catch up just by watching.
All right. Good to know. So Ta-Nehisi Coates has been all over the press promoting his new book, The Message, which Matt is going to review for Left Reckoning. So you guys should definitely check that out. But it's just been really, honestly, excellent and a breath of fresh air to have a writer with this amount of capital with liberals and with people who may be liberal Zionist or folks that were unwilling to really even engage in the topic of Israel-Palestine because, it's so complicated. I mean, Coates is just basically saying it's not complicated. It's really not. And he explains what he saw there, and he puts it within a context that makes sense for American liberals. Racial segregation, Jim Crow. And this is what I honestly, and I'm seeing on CNN, they're having these doctors on after that New York Times piece with bullets in their head. The cracks are starting, and there's more coverage of the genocide in Gaza, even though it's not being talked about in those terms, than there was even 2 months ago. And I credit Ta-Nehisi Coates for his bravery on this and for bringing this to the forefront by going all over on a bunch of mainstream shows to promote his book and talking about this very clearly. So he went on with Ezra Klein for the New York Times. And here he kind of calls Ezra out for his framing of people on both sides of this conflict.
Compared to most outlets, I've had a fairly wide range of opinion on Israel on the show. And I've had everyone from right-wing Israeli commentators to actual Hamas apologists. And still, I believe that maybe with one exception of people I've had on, that if you got all the people I've had on in a room, they would solve it. And that's because it's not really representative.
Ezra, why is one group right-wing advocates, or what you just said, and the other group Hamas apologists?
What do you mean?
Like, why are they not right-wing apologists?
They're right-wing apologists.
Yeah, that's just not what you just said. Like you called the Hamas folks, and I'm not saying they're not apologists.
Compared to when I say I've had right-wing Israelis on, I mean people who support Netanyahu, not people who support Ben Gvir and Smotrich. I do not put
not much of a difference
Hamas
there.
Is a complicated organization. I've tried to treat it on the show as a complicated organization.
Right.
It did spend many, many years specifically targeting killing civilians. I take that as different.
You said you're different than Netanyahu.
I take that as different than Netanyahu, yeah. Certainly the military wing there. Do you not? Like, what did you think of October 7th?
Jesus.
Oh, I thought it was horrific. It was absolutely horrific. I mean, one of the things I just said in an earlier question was I've spent a long time sort of grappling with the idea of nonviolence. And
I just want to, like, the thing he said there about they've spent a lot of time focusing on civilians. Now, don't get into like the sort of was synchronatic or whatever, the lack of I can't think of the word. where it's both sides on the same lack of balance here. Go ahead, Brandon. You were going to say something.
No, finish your thought.
I lost my train of thought trying to think of that word.
Lack of symbiotic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
My point
I will
was,
say.
I think.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brandon.
Gosh,
well,
we're
I
in
will say.
traffic here.
Yeah, I'm just too polite.
The audio is delayed for me, so I didn't hear that till after. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I will say I think Ezra Klein stumbling there when confronted with his imprecise, we'll say, framing of the two sides of the debate as legitimate far right advocates versus like Hamas apologists, and then being confronted and stumbling is just an example of how oftentimes when our media and various media, not necessarily the Israeli media, but lots of medias in the West, when they're trying to justify atrocities at home and abroad, they just provide a series of like contexts for that violence that paints the person who is the victim as deserving of it without ever coming out and explicitly saying that they deserve the violence against them. And this is a big part of why Ta-Nehisi Coates's appearances has disrupted that, because he goes the next step and says that despite what you might think about the context under which the violence is happening under October 7th, the history of Palestinian violence against or rocket attacks against Israel, none of those things justify ethnic cleansing, none of those things justify genocide, none of those things justify the concentration camps that Israel is running like Seder Taman, none of those things are justified by this context that you're providing. And they don't necessarily want to come out there and stick their neck. Ezra Klein doesn't, a few of these more liberal leaning pundits, they don't want to come out there and stick their neck and say, yes, it does. Like some people will say, yes, it does. Some people like Donald Trump will say, yes, it does. But when you're trying to justify atrocities to, a more center right, center left audience, you just provide these, this cop shot a black person. Let me tell you about the crime statistics in this city. And let me tell you about all these things that happen in the area that might lead to you believing that this is justified. But I'll never come out and say it's justified. And Ta-Nehisi Coates has now started to press people on what they think this context actually means for the ongoing genocide and the previous genocides. And they're stumbling over that because they know it doesn't, at least to them, that coming out and saying that it justifies what we're seeing is just, it's improper. It's not right. And it's not something that they can say or advocate for directly. They've just been taught to dance around it in a certain way.
And you see here how that the language, it's not just, really like when you hear on cable news, the active language about Hamas slaughter and intentional targeting of civilians and, 9 Palestinians died under fire, or tragedy and humanitarian crisis in Gaza. You see that? Yes, for many of like these mainstream anchors, these are just like guideposts that corporate media provides for them.
Yeah.
But for liberal Zionists, like I would imagine it seems like Klein is, it's actually something that they inherently have just absorbed. The idea that Israel is kind of just moral and good by its very nature. And so civilian deaths, I mean, he basically says he doesn't think it's the same thing. Though Netanyahu and Hamas, actually, you're right, it's not the same thing. In terms of the death toll and in terms of the intentional targeting of civilians, Hamas, it was 800 that were civilians that were killed on October 7th, and the rest were combatants. Israel has now, according to a few weeks ago, 99 healthcare workers who were American who returned to the United States. They say at minimum Israel has killed 118,000 Palestinians in Gaza, and that is likely an undercount. Right. They did in October 7th on one day in Lebanon, and no one cared. No one cared. Yep. And so, it really is just so revealing that Klein can't even conceive of the fact that he just made a pretty racist statement. And
backfilling it. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry, Bender, but the word I was looking for was asymmetry. And the way he says, the time spent targeting civilians, never mind the asymmetry of what it means when you're confined within a certain space and completely dominated. But yeah, you could say that instead of the raw number of civilians killed, or even the percentage of civilians to combatants killed within it. And Israel is the greater killer of civilians. So what you see is how the term terrorism is used in a colonial structure to justify a certain kind of violence and not others.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, do you recall, I mean, I still see it every now and then, but not too long ago, one of the main talking points you would see from the pro-Israel crowd is that, like, the equivalent of 30,000 Americans died or something. And, like, trying to also, another thing they would say was compare it to the number of 9/11s.
Right.
And then
Oh, God.
It's insane because they know that when you look at the raw numbers of people who actually have been killed, there is no one who's been more successful in killing civilians than Israel.
Yes.
It's not even close.
It's exactly right, Binder. And that's also why we haven't had an official updated tally since what? It's like 42,000. It's been stuck on that for 6 months. Like, you know
Since
why that
January,
is?
at least it feels like.
It's exactly what you're saying. This was the deliberate strategy by Israel. And it's frustrating to me that people aren't getting like hip to this yet. They destroyed the entirety of civil infrastructure. They killed all the record keepers and the ability to keep records so they can rely on the mythology of them as the most moral actor ever. And you have liberal Zionists like Klein who inherently believe it. And they're not going to know the true death totals until at the end when we can get some like people in there to investigate. And by then it will be too late. So at minimum, we have 118,000 dead. At minimum.
I mean, listening to that clip from Ezra Klein's podcast, to me, the most like amazing thing was just how Ezra Klein, the silence, like he seemed legitimately taken back at Ta-Nehisi Coates calling him out for his wording. And I don't think that wording is like something he deliberately wrote down to like poke at Ta-Nehisi Coates or anything. I think it's just autopilot at this point for these guys to just automatically oh yeah, I'm talking to someone who's a pro-Palestine Hamas apologist. I'm talking to someone who's pro-Israel, and they're really supportive of Netanyahu. Oh, right-wing figure in Israel. I mean, it's just automatic. And when Ta-Nehisi Coates called him out for that, he was legitimately, from just the silence and his stuttering, shocked that like, oh, what do I do here? What do I do here? Because he still has to, obviously, he's not gonna outright admit that he just got called out. He still has to figure something out to say to cover his tracks, and he tries to by jumping to. So, what did you think about October 7th? Then, huh, Ta-Nehisi? Like that was another moment.
Yeah.
After drawing the distinction between the Smotrich and Netanyahu, which like, who is here for that at this point? Like,
yeah, I mean, and you're like Binder, you're exactly right that he stuttered and got nervous and moved on to that was him trying to go on the offense to paint Coates as like the extremist terrorist apologist because he got so uncomfortable by being called out by his reflexive, seriously, racism. And liberal Zionists don't like to think of themselves that way.
Like let's return to the very fundamental.
The equivalent of what he said for like Americans is if like you came across a Trump supporter and they were going on and on about how they're going to deport all the immigrants. And you said to them, oh, so you like Stephen Miller? And he was like, whoa, not that guy. I just really love Trump. I mean, that's the equivalent. That's the equivalent.
100%. All right. Let's get is there any more of that?
No, I think that's probably as much. Because I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates has already said what he thinks about October 7th, which is that it's horrible and also not the start of history, which is all that really needs to be said about it.
All right. Well, Dan from Columbus, I have to keep reminding myself that y'all talking about Ezra now, not Ethan, because I go the same last name. Yes.
Same initials.
Jared, sorry?
Same initials, too.
Oh, yeah.
EK.
Bobby Nafo, Israel's making legal justice for the perpetrators of the October 7th massacre impossible. It doesn't want to involve international law in the process at all. Right. Fart Twain, I really want to read the message on my flights back home a week ago. I couldn't find a single copy in Boston Logan or SeaTac. I think, I haven't checked the charts, but I'd imagine his book is selling very well.
I mean, the fact that these guys are all inviting him on the podcast, their podcast and shows to say these things. I mean, they don't do that because they want to spread the idea that maybe Palestinians have had it a little rougher than the media has wanted you to think. No, they want to get a piece of that action that his book is selling, and everyone wants to talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's a hot commodity right now. That's why they're talking to him. They want the views. They want the attention. But yeah, I mean, also give it to them if it means you speak to their audience. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's also on that circuit. He has been for a decade now. The real question is, will he get invited back places? Like after he's come on and proved that like these kinds of provocations from the likes of Ezra Klein, from the likes of any number of like liberals or center left pundits are things that he's going to push back on the same way each time. And each of them will not have a response to it if he gets invited back to those shows, because, you know, a lot of people get like excommunicated from that circle for things like this.
Bull Prog says, FYI, Hassan has been doing worse than apologia for groups like Hezbollah and Houthis in his reaction to Zionism. I mean, I don't know what he said, but I really don't care. To be honest, I find the like safe, cozy, rich white people in America picking apart the ideology of resistance groups.
Yep.
There's nothing to me that makes me want to like scream more. It's the height of privilege, and it's just such Western chauvinism. So I support Hassan 100%. I think it's great that he had that Houthi kid on back in the day, and we should be understanding more why Houthis, Hezbollah, all of these folks are resisting.
Yes,
and honestly, I'm like. That's what Klein is like. What he was saying there too, Ezra Klein. Like this just like reflexive characterization of Palestinians or Arabs as just savages is disgusting. And it's widespread and shared on the Democratic and Republican side. And liberal Zionists are going to have to confront their own racism. They're unwilling to. You saw that in the Ezra Klein clip. But these are resistance groups. And picking apart what they believe, I mean, it's just, it's
as if it hasn't been massively influenced by the colonial, divide and conquer strategy.
We propped up religious fundamentalist groups in the region for that very reason, so it could make it easier for people. And look, I love Bull Prog. I mean, I'm not trying to pick on you, but it's just like.
But this is frustrating. And
I disagree with the criticism of Hassan very strongly on this
and the
front.
Smearing of people on this front as terrorist sympathetic, as opposed to just fucking mature. I'm sorry, I love Bull Prog too, but like this sort of thing that's going around, especially when fucking supporters of Israel want to talk about policing other people's ideology. Nah, fuck off.
Yeah.
I also think
mainstream media has been interviewing literal like terrorist groups for decades, because that's what journalism is. You talk to all sides to understand the complete story, and then you report it. It doesn't mean you're supportive of everything or anything they do, but that's what you do. And I mean, the only thing I think of is that Hassan interviewed that young Houthi guy. That's
I don't
all.
think he was technically even Houthi, but like young Yemeni pirate sort of chap. And people want him. I think because of the Asman Gold thing, which I also didn't follow, people thought, well, let's go back and ban Hassan for that. And I would just say, whoever's at Twitch making that decision not to take action against Hassan, great job. That's how it should be worked, as the employers that know better and make these decisions. But yeah, it's horrible.
I also just think, just one last thing, that a lot of times this position that it's apologia is just, for me, an example of how the West is always looking to justify its own atrocities, because what it's oftentimes called apologia are just like the cause and effect of why things happened, like the actual context for why these groups exist and what they're doing, and not a justification for that, but it's automatically taken as a justification for it, because when you provide context for, like, when this kind of context is provided for Western atrocities, like I said earlier, it's usually meant to absolve them of it. It's usually meant to go like, oh, you see, well, yeah, we killed all of the Native Americans here, using smallpox blankets, but it was for X, Y, and Z reason, to establish like a Western democracy, for, to be a shining city on a hill. And I won't say it's good, but I'll just provide that context and let you determine whether or not you think it's good or not. But with a strong hint that it is. And so when you provide context for, why people don't like the West, why people might do 9/11, why people might do an October 7th, what are the actual historical historical and material conditions that led to these things, people see it also like, oh, you're in favor of it. Because when they do it about the U.S., even if they say sometimes ostensibly they're not, they are they are trying to justify what the U.S. is. They are trying to justify what Israel is doing. And so, they assume everyone is doing that back to them. It's just projection.
Right. 100%. Let's take another call really quickly. Calling from a 919 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Hey.
This is Todd from Raleigh.
Todd
can you hear me okay?
Todd from Raleigh. Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. Well, first thing I wanted to say, love y'all guys. I'm flying up from Raleigh to New York for the election show, and I'm super excited about that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So I've been, because Twitter, X, whatever, is a hellscape now, been getting a shit ton of Douglas Murray posts in my feed. And one thing in one day going down the rabbit hole, I found out that despite him continually insisting on the importance of Judeo-Christian values, as he says, he is himself a non-believer, but has had a long history of insisting on the importance of mass belief in Jewish and Christian religion. And as a Christian myself, I find his insistence on the importance of the value of faith being more so just like the existence of it and the structure of it more so than the adherence itself. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah.
And I've seen people like Prager make these cases before. That I think one time Prager literally said whether or not God exists is actually not as important as much as the necessity of religion being the case.
Mm-hmm.
So what is their what's their
deal?
Their goal? Yeah.
Well, I mean,
white supremacy. White supremacy. That's what it's all about. That's why they talk about Judeo-Christian values. They're talking about primarily a Western civilization, white people, society that they want to uphold. That's what they mean. That's exactly what they mean. They're just using that terminology to not straight up say that they're hood-wearing white supremacists.
Sorry, Matt, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's that, and it's more broadly just hierarchies, which include white supremacy, but also male domination over women, straight male, the construction of the family in a very specific way over people who may have a different gender identity, people who may be queer, gay, lesbian. They say God's that's why they could be total hypocrites about what Jesus says and what the lessons of the Bible are, because all they're really interested in religion as it operates is creating those rigid hierarchies for people.
That makes sense. I guess the thing that baffles me the most then is he sits there and says, well, religion is too ridiculous for me, but you small people need it to be kept in line. So who is he for? What's the market for him? Because he's clearly doing a shit job evangelizing.
Yeah,
people who think like him. People who think like him. I've seen the reactions to him from his supporters. You have the white supremacists who believe that the evangelical Christians and the Jewish people are below them, and they'll use them. And usually when they talk about Jewish people, they're strictly talking about Israelis, like the Israel government. They're talking about their support for the Israeli government. It's a far right-wing institution. But they use those groups to basically they use those groups to basically curry favor with those who are looking to get support from anywhere. You'll see it all the time with the rabid right-wing pro-Israel people online, where they will find allies anywhere. They don't care about what you even think about Jewish people if you are ready to stand up for Israel. I've seen it time and time again. And then You have, I mean, look at Douglas Murray, for example. And then you have the people who think like him, who also think that like we will use these people to, you know, get their votes, get their money, whatever. And we'll maintain that hierarchy where we're smarter, we're better, but we maintain this sort of Western white male dominated culture.
And it also, to your point, Binder, it helps build up the money aspect comes into it. I mean, in this country, religion takes the form of prosperity gospel in many ways. So it enforces the idea that the more wealth you have, the more deserving you are of it, because God ordained it to be. And I think that's a big reason why Trump, by the way, had a lot of popularity within the Republican base, and why it feels like a cult is because he fits quite neatly into the religious hierarchy that also includes capitalism.
Yeah, religion is useful for people, and it survives in the people because it's, you know, community and sense like that. It survives among the powerful because it is a good form of social control. We have Tucker and Elon discussing this, two other minds, if we want to get to this.
Yeah, Tom, we're going to let you go, but really thoughtful call. Really appreciate it. We're going to play a clip in just a sec that reinforces your point.
Awesome. Thank y'all. Love y'all.
Yeah, thanks so much. Looking forward to seeing you on election night. So, Matt just pulled this up. I think this is perfect for the segment.
This is from the hours-long sit-down between Tucker and Elon from a few weeks ago.
Oh, God.
You know, if you're 5 years old, it's fine. there's you know, so, but I'm not Jewish. It's just that my father's two partners in his engineering firm went to the same Hebrew preschool, and it was near our house, so I just got sent there. So, but
I'm sorry. Pause it. You know, pause it. Listen, that's got to be the most ridiculous. I am tangentially connected to this, so I know what I'm talking about. I've ever heard in my life. Listen, I've brought up how like I am ethnically Jewish. My father is Jewish, and that's like, and even that I feel uncomfortable even like claiming myself as Jewish because I wasn't brought up in the religion. And when people ask what my ethnicity is, I'm white. I'm white. People, you know, but the fact that this guy just went on there and said, "Oh, listen, there was 2 engineers at my father's firm that were Jewish. Let me tell you about Judaism." Is the
He's
most
Jewish by osmosis.
fucking hilarious thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm sorry.
All right.
Hebrew preschool, and it was near our house, so I just got sent there. So, but I you know.
Great talker.
You know, I maybe this will make me even more enemies, but I have trouble sort of believing all these stories, these religious stories, but obviously a lot of people do, and I respect people who want to have religious views. I'm not trying to dissuade them from their religious views, but anyway, I'm just saying. I guess the operating system I have is sort of a physics engineering operating system where I try to understand as much as possible.
Talk about yourself like
reality.
This.
You know, in physics, you're not supposed to believe anything absolutely. You're supposed to question things. That's how you discover new physics. You know, in engineering, that's how you discover if your machine will work or not work. Will the rocket get to orbit? Will you know?
Yeah.
You know, if your rocket is designed with physics in mind correctly, it will get to orbit, and if it is not, it will not get to orbit, no matter what your belief system is. You can believe.
What is this about?
You know, yeah. You know, it's like I meet a lot of people. Speaking of LA, I meet a lot of people in LA who believe witchcraft is real, and then you can do spells. And that spells and witchcraft magic.
Tucker believes in witches.
Can you magic us to the moon? And no one has yet been able to magic us to the moon.
So yeah, there was that, and then there was also the fact that when Trump said, "I turned at the last moment," and that almost makes you believe in God. Elon quote tweeted that and said, "Oh wow, this is interesting. Me too."
Great. Great.
He'll
Glad
have
found
his
God.
he'll have his come to Jesus moment like Russell Brand. I have to imagine. Like I think that just has to be on the horizon for Elon Musk. I just feel it in him.
You feel that he's going to be hawking amulets to protect you from Wi-Fi radiation while you're rocketing to the moon? That's a way to offset it.
Well, you see, the problem is he has like an engineering and physics-based operating system, but it's Windows Vista. So there are a lot of bugs.
Yeah.
I've heard he has a ketamine-based operating system.
I gotta say, it's
just based on what I've seen from his
his
tweeting habits.
So you guys
it is something that we listened to this clip, and it was like, let's listen to what they had to say about the topic. And I honestly could not fucking follow what Elon Musk was saying. I have no idea the point he was trying to make. He's a really bad speaker. He's really bad.
Him,
he
Peter
doesn't know what he's
Thiel, all
talking
these
about.
guys.
That's why it's not just because, like, you know, people will say, oh, he's autistic. No, it's not that. It goes well beyond that. The dude literally doesn't know what he's talking about in this realm. He is a complete idiot on a lot of things, but especially when it comes to news and politics and current events. And because he's been successful in some areas of business, people think that extrapolates to everything. He must be a genius everywhere. Just like, and I think I've heard from a lot of people who say this, who were once Elon Musk fans. They were fans of Elon Musk until they heard him speak about something that they were knowledgeable about. And then they quickly realized that he is a charlatan. He's got no clue. He bloviates, so he sounds smart to people who don't know any better. And then if you do know about the issue, then that's when, you know, the paint starts to peel off the wall and you realize that this guy's just bullshitting.
That's what's the wild thing about all these guys and how they love to be guests on long form podcasts for some reason. You are a billionaire.
Because they're narcissists.
Yeah, and it's like you're not doing yourself any favor by overexposing how like the actual level of your intelligence. People would have overinflated the level of this guy's like intellectual capacity so much if he just stayed offline.
Right. Or honestly, it's preferable when he jumps around like a toddler seeing an ice cream truck. Like, at least he's not fucking talking.
It's not even hypothetical. Just like 5 years ago, before COVID, and he started acting like some sort of expert on vaccines and immune disease, communicable diseases. Before he started doing that, people legitimately thought this guy was like a modern day Tesla, or an Albert Einstein or something. People thought he was a genius. He was beloved. He had the public opinion on him was approval through the roof. People thought he was great. They actually believed this guy was going to take them to Mars and bring in the next generation of technology for human beings. And then he started talking about things he has no clue about, which is a lot of things. And then they started to realize, wow, this was the guy we thought that about? Like, it's not even hypothetical. That's who he was. He was a beloved American figure, a global figure even. They put him in Iron Man as someone who was supposed to be like a Tony Stark type guy. Blech.
I think, honestly, a lot of people thought he was smart and found out that he's just opinionated, which is not really, the same thing.
I mean, that's almost like he's opinionated, sort of, but he's really I think he's just mentally unwell for the most part. He doesn't seem to have any grasp of, I guess that's a billionaire. He doesn't have any grasp of reality. So.
What's the selection process for these guys? Is they put a bunch of money in PayPal in the 90s and it hit big money, and now they get to pretend like they are the lords of innovation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, it was all about being at the right place at the right time for every single one of these guys. Like, it's all it was. They didn't create some sort of marvelous new technology. They didn't create some new never before seen hardware. They fucking made the more successful version of the same software that 20 other companies were also creating.
Yeah. All right, we'll read some IMs and we'll get back to some clips here. The Devil's Region. Zionism is profoundly anti-Jewish. I don't think there's a higher form of anti-Semitism than insisting that genocide is a tenet of Judaism and that the safety of Jewish people around the world depends on assassinating a helpless population of children and the elderly. I mean, well said.
And Hitlerian anti-Semitism is probably right up there.
Yeah.
But I do agree that Zionism is a form of anti-Semitism. I believe it was Herzl or one of the guys who was on the scene in France. I want to get that citation wrong, but yeah, I think it's foundational, and it's a raw material that maintains the project.
Big socialist energy. Did you see the BBC whistleblowers talking about how they are banned from using the word genocide and how they need to stop or correct the guest they have who says it on air? I did not see that, but that would not shock me at all. Vinny P, I listened to the whole interview. Ezra was fronting like he was sympathetic to Coates' point of view for most of it, and then he drops that disgusting framing on that question. Yes, that's 100% true.
It was
I'm sure he thinks he's...
Oh, go ahead, Brennan.
I'm sure he thinks he's sympathetic. I'm sure that a lot of people think they're sympathetic on the issue, but they've learned how to distance that like sympathy. Again, in a very American tradition, to distance that sympathy from a call for change. Right.
I mean, oddly, Hunger Games was on TV the other day, and I was watching that, and like the almost like the spectacle of like the freaking, again, it's a young adult novel, so sorry if it's a rudimentary reference, but like the crying in the Capitol as the kids die in the freaking like game that the totalitarian government is putting on, like they can feel sympathy for it or say like, oh, this is so sad as I observe this, but there's nothing that like it doesn't motivate their actions or change anything about their perspective beyond that.
It's performative. It's performative sympathy, not in the sense that
sympathy, not empathy.
Not in the sense that.
Yeah.
Well, I never know the difference, but I just mean it's performative in the sense that it's something that its value is in and of itself, as opposed to it being fake. I don't know if he actually feels sympathy, but that sympathy is meant to, signal a certain level of liberalness or signal the fact that like he has the capacity to feel bad for like oppressive or the oppressed people, but it's not meant to actually move any material reality.
Right.
A lot of it's honestly just straight up people are brainwashed. Like they were raised a certain way and were taught these things in a certain way. Well, I think that's also like an under discussed thing about like how young people view this. Like a lot of young people who have been active and vocal about this, it's not so much like obviously social media and getting news from independent outlets and having that access is a huge part of it, but also like the issue was, as compared to previous years and decades, the Israel-Palestine conflicts and everything involving the West Bank and Gaza and the land and Israel's occupation, that before October 7th, it's been obviously there were some events that happened, but it was in the mainstream media and talked about in like school and education-wise. It was pretty quiet comparatively to the years before. And I think that's a huge thing that like the young people didn't have this being like shoved down their throats, steal a right-wing favorite phrase, that like, oh, Israel is the run in the right here. Israel is the moral one here. Israel didn't do anything wrong. And they didn't have that. And they saw what happened on October 7th. They understood what the situation was after that from seeing the media and what Israel's response was. And they quickly realized without having that brainwashed period, having that blank slate that, what happened on October 7th was wrong. What Israel is doing is wrong.
Yeah. Exactly right. JR in Philly says exactly what we were saying. Hezbollah and Hamas are resistance organizations. They provide services in the face of colonial oppression. Hezbollah, I'm sorry. Hezbollah is a major political party in Lebanon. They have civil infrastructure. They have non-combatants. They have combatants. They have politicians. But when you call someone just a blanket terrorist, it doesn't you don't have to think critically about the fact that it's not just the West that has like governmental structures. I understand that Lebanon's basically like a failed state at this point, and the government hasn't.
Sure, Israel has nothing to do with that.
Right. That's the point. That's the point. And then, but that's exactly right, because then when it fails because of Western slaughter and influence, then you get people to go around and say like, see, they're savages, they're terrorists, they can't get their shit together. It fulfills the narrative that they want.
Well, also terrorists, like Matt was saying too, and it's become worse, especially under the Obama drone regime, has always just been a construct in asymmetrical warfare to paint the armies, the resistance fighters, whatever the case happens to be, the resistance group happens to be at the time, as something outside of the Western paradigm, and therefore, not subject to the same restraint that, enemy combatants in a European war might be subject to. Like, you might be required to, like, I don't know, I just saw Napoleon. So, like, hey, you're not supposed to shoot the general because, like, he's like a nobleman or something. Like,
Right.
little gestures of respect in warfare that Europeans imagine that they have been engaging in, and it's just not been true, obviously, in most cases. You're no longer, they're not privy to that. And especially in drone warfare regime that Obama labeled everyone who happened to fit a certain demographic as a terrorist, that was just a manner by which we might sweep civilian casualties under the rug, and like in that war and in future conflicts, because people will reference previous wars America has been in the civilian to combatant rate and the death rate, and talk about Israel's genocide in that context. But a lot of those numbers are skewed based on statistics that were entirely made up by our administration to look less bad, in the face of, like, hey, the West as a barbaric regime.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and the word terrorist creates an entirely opposite impression in the people than what, say, a graph showing casualties for years going backward.
Yep. Toilet paper guy watcher, fry their brain with a reactionary mind. I'm listening to it now, and I think I'm too dumb for this shit.
Corey Robin?
Yeah,
it's a good book, but yeah, he goes back to like Edmund Burke and stuff.
I think that was one of the recommendations for the passive aggressive book giving that I advocate for. JC in Arizona, she's always been Norwegian, and she turned Finnish. That's Trump reference. Broad from Virginia, Matt's framing of the GOP deportation threats as disciplinary tool for capitalists is so important, because I've talked to people who are not hate motivated, who mistakenly think it's a necessary evil to keep immigrants that undercut wages out, and don't realize that the GOP only wants to use ICE threats to undercut everybody's wages further.
Yep.
Small D Democrat, Ethan's wife literally served in the IDF. Okay, yeah.
Any Israeli does, yeah.
All right, let's do. You want to do this clip?
Yeah. So this is Breaking Points. They had a good discussion. We'll cut into it about halfway through. Good discussion, meaning Crystal absolutely hands Saagar his ass on a plate. And I think it's just interesting the way the sort of downplaying of the threat here that I find. Yeah.
And this is about Trump and his threats to our political system. They start with this clip here of Michael Flynn.
Okay, believe me, the gates of hell, my hell, will be unleashed.
Look,
your
again,
thoughts on that,
I think people seize on this stuff. Mike Flynn has no connection to the campaign. He was fired after 33 days or whatever as a national security
Wait, can
advisor.
you pause it for a sec?
I believe.
What did Mike Flynn say there at the beginning?
Basically, I'm gonna get pardoned, and we're gonna seek retribution.
Okay, gotcha.
Basically, the thing that Trump said with the we're gonna have the
enemy
military,
within.
Exactly, the military can sort it out real quick.
Okay.
I need to make sure exactly what happened here, but he either pled guilty or he had some situation with the foreign agent stuff that happened at that time. Yeah, it was. I covered it so much at the time. It was something like Gulen and Erdogan. He basically has made a.
It's interesting that it gets this wrong, because he's the guy who's downplayed a Russiagate the entire time. And maybe I should sort this up confirm this myself, but I'm pretty sure it was lying to the FBI about Russia stuff. Maybe we can sort that out, but I'll just let this play a little bit more while I look that up.
A career of like QAnon style adjacent like events and like bankrolling himself since then. So I'm not worried about this. I don't think that Mike Flynn speaks with any authority whatsoever.
But is what he's saying that different from what Trump has been saying? Because Trump is saying, like, I will be your retribution and calling out the National Guard and the military. I mean, it seems pretty consistent with the sentiments that Trump himself is expressing.
I mean, in terms of I will be your retribution, he said that last time around. And what did it look like? Mostly like hiring people like Mike Flynn and it not working out so well. to the extent that it would be nice is if, hey, we actually did fire a bunch of people inside the CIA and the FBI. I don't think that's so bad. I guess it's, it's about degrees, and it's about which and how you interpret like what that looks like and what's extreme or whatever's not. Like, to me, I think Schedule F is a great idea. I think more than half of these people should be fired. Is that what Mike Flynn is talking about? No. And that's another thing too, where if you have to point to his track record.
When you say the gates of hell are going to be unleashed, or I'll be arrested,
but he's not,
I'll call out the National Guard, or the military should deal with my political opponents. That's not about Schedule F.
No, but he says this shit all the time. How much of it actually happened? I was there when Trump was like, I'm going to take military funding and build the border wall, and then shut down the government for 3 weeks, and then cave to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. In practice, how does this shit actually work? Like, most of the time, it doesn't usually work out to his benefit. It turns out that there are decent checks and balances in the American system. Look, we could play the next part here, and this is probably more consequential, from J.D. Vance when he was asked about who the most consequential part of the government will be. He said the Attorney General. Let's take a listen.
On the Attorney General, you said on Friday that the most important person in government in a Trump-Vance administration, other than the president, is not you. It would be the Attorney General. Why do you consider that the most important spot, the second most important spot?
Well, one reason, Martha, is just public opinion. And what I mean here is that we really want the American people to believe that we have a fair and equitable administration of justice. If not, the entire sort of system falls apart. You need people to believe that if the Attorney General prosecutes somebody, it's motivated by justice and law and not by politics. And unfortunately,
would Donald Trump go after his political opponents? Would Donald Trump go after his political opponents? He suggested that in the past.
Martha, he was president for 4 years, and he didn't go after his political opponents. You know who did go after her political opponents? Kamala Harris, who has tried to arrest everything from pro-life activists to her political opponents.
He said those people who cheated will be prosecuted
as a weapon against people. Well, he said that people who violated our election laws will be prosecuted. I think that's the administration of law. He didn't say people are going to go to jail because they disagree with me. That has, in fact, been the administration and the policy of Kamala Harris, Martha.
I mean, a lot of people looked at that and said he was going to prosecute. I think look, this is much more bureaucratic. It's about having somebody who, rules that a certain program or whatever can be legal, because a lot of that comes back to like how you interpret certain bureaucratic actions. The shutdown thing.
I want to get to her destroying his argument here in just a second, but I find it fascinating. First of all, his entire argument is don't take Trump at his word. Don't take him at his word. Elect him anyway. Yeah. Why? Why? And he just said earlier that Schedule F is a good thing, an executive order on that front, which is a part of Project 2025, which I'm sure he would scoff at being associated with the Donald Trump campaign. He's saying that that's what he wants to do. What Schedule F is about replacing 50,000 federal bureaucrats, employees that he's talking about there, the bureaucracy that he's claiming is going to protect the American people from his authoritarian tendencies. 60 seconds before, he was saying how he was in favor of Schedule F, purging the federal government of career employees to replace them with Trump loyalists. That's a part of Project 2025. So first, his argument is, oh, come on, Trump's not being serious about all these repeated claims over and over again, the enemy from within, even though on January 6th, he incited an insurrection. In the lead up to that, he had fake electors slates. He wanted to pressure the Arizona governor and others to replace the electors who are there, designated by the national two parties to represent the will of the people in regards to the vote as it relates to the Electoral College. This was, and then he was also suing in dozens of court cases to overturn the results of the election, all thrown out without merit. So there were like at least 3 different efforts that he tried to make to overturn the election. It was the fake elector scheme, it was the lawsuits, and also the I should say 4, calling the Republicans in state office to pressure them. And then it was January 6th, where he basically threw Mike Pence to a mob because he refused to overturn the election. It's not just like his rhetoric. We have so much evidence. And he's saying, don't worry about that. The bureaucracy will protect you. The bureaucracy that he just said he was in favor of doing away with.
And let's let him get reps in too. I zoomed a little bit ahead here. Go ahead, Brandon. We'll pick it back up.
I will just say, like, he kind of like contradicts himself there too. At first, it's like, oh, Trump just says things. He just says all these things, and he kind of pivots to like, okay, but we actually have checks and balances. So he might mean these things that he says, but someone will hopefully get in the way of them. And I think you just have to note that so much of like the campaign surrogacy for the Donald Trump campaign from more savvy Republicans is just trying to like smooth out Trump's crazier edges. That was like half of what the vice presidential debate was on J.D. Vance's side, which is like, oh, you remember that thing that Trump said that you thought you heard that he said? Turns out that you're wrong. You're interpreting that wrong.
Yeah.
Or falling
Clean
back
up
on
crew.
like, cleanup crew, or being like, oh no, he's just trolling libs. He's triggering libs. That was the classic excuse. But yeah, like so much of it is just trying to insist that despite saying and wanting to do things that Republicans always say and want to do, that he just won't be able to do it, or that broadly speaking Republicans won't be able to do it. Like that's the main way that people run interference with Republicans, just like pretending that all the things they say they want to do are just things that they're not going to do. They're just saying that. That's very telling.
Because they're unpopular.
Yeah.
And he's trying to limit it to like, I don't think they'll try to steal the election thing. The whole point, Sagar, is that you're giving them 4 years in power to have repetitions toward these goals. Like that is that. And I skipped a bit ahead here, but we get to some of Sagar's politics.
And say the election was stolen and do literally whatever I say, no matter how outrageous or fraudulent it ultimately is. He doesn't mean like you're going to stand by my tariff policy.
I mean, we have no evidence of that. He's not currently in power. No,
because he literally said, I won't hire anyone who admits the 2020 election wasn't stolen. So that's the evidence. It's his own words.
Then we'll have a very, very small pool to choose from, and they're welcome to do that and pursue that policy if they want.
So you're wrong.
And they will be able to hire maybe like 5 people. Like that's what I mean. Maybe if he really does that, then he's an idiot, and then people shouldn't vote for him. You can decide for yourself. That's what I'm saying. I'm giving my assessment of how I would look at it. Mass deportation.
If he does that after you vote for him, maybe you shouldn't vote for him. But anyway, this is the revealing part. Sorry.
Shouldn't vote for him. You can decide for yourself. That's what I'm saying. I'm giving my assessment of how I would look at it. Mass deportation, yeah. The libs are going to fight tooth and nail. Every Catholic charity and all these people are going to sue with some fake Hawaii judge to make it. So yeah, I support mass deportation. I want an attorney general that would make sure that that was legally executed. So it's one of those where what you think is radical, I think is actually necessary. And probably vice versa too, in terms of what, legalizing weed?
One violent day in which police officers could get
Wow.
Wait, I want to hear the rest of what she had to say.
What, legalizing weed?
One violent day in which police officers could get extraordinarily rough with impunity.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that that's not legal, or even probably like
calling out the military
legal
against your political opponents.
Again, I don't think that that's legal. It's never happened before. Let's think about when's the last time that it happened.
I just think that there's a real double standard in the way that you analyze his words versus the words of, literally any Democratic politician.
I mean, I guess it just comes back to when we have.
You don't believe him.
Yeah, I actually just don't believe it'll happen. No, I believe.
You pick out the ones that you like, and you say those ones will happen. But the ones I don't like, no. I'm just gonna.
I'll be honest.
Pretend those didn't happen.
That if he could do it, I think that he would. But I believe in the American system enough to say that most of the shit's not going to happen regardless. Okay. That's what I think. I think that if he could do it, he would. I also think Democrats would do a lot of the stuff if they would. They literally indicted Trump. I mean, they indicted him under January 6th.
Committed crimes.
Huh? I mean, again, that's a pretty subjective way of looking at it. And I don't think it would be all that easy. I just think, first of all, that probably punctures a little bit.
They also indicted Hunter Biden and Bob Menendez and Eric Adams. So
I mean, to Hunter Biden, it took 5 years of crawling, to the bringing it into media story to actually get him charged. If he was any normal citizen, he would have been charged like a decade ago.
No, so he wouldn't. Oh my God! Okay,
he wouldn't have been charged at all. If he was any normal civilian, he wouldn't have been charged at all. Like that's ridiculous.
It was honestly, Sagar, he's so full of shit that I'm just like in awe. I mean,
this is 26 minutes of Sagar and Jetty being absolutely flailing because he's realizing he's full of shit and being exposed for it.
And Crystal's like incredibly talented and one of the best voices we have, honestly, on the left, like in this space right now. And I feel for her having to deal with this crap all the time. But like, I mean, it just is incredible. She said it exactly right. He dismisses the things about Trump that he doesn't want to deal with, and the ones that he likes, that's definitely going to happen.
Did he sincerely believe all the defund the police? That was the Nancy Pelosi was saying, because at the time I was saying, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. But he was hyperventilating about it and saying, it's just wild. It's just interesting. Yeah, actually, the revelation that he supports mass deportation and considers that symmetrical to legalizing marijuana. Like, this is a right-wing guy born in 1992.
Also, he said that he says that he wants to have an attorney general to make the mass deportation regime legal as possible. Then he comes and goes, he goes, oh yeah, but I don't think it's going to get violent or the police are going to be cracking skulls because that would be illegal. But like you just said, that they could in fact change the law in such a way that would make something that is currently unthinkable and illegal legal, right? I mean, I think this kind of arguing works online. It works on Twitter. It works on X, where like if people start getting too hot on you, people start pinning you down with like why you don't make any sense, you can just disappear. You can just stop responding, and you can just like, oh, well, I don't know, and drum your way out of the conversation to go pick on somebody who isn't as articulate on these issues, or how you're like logically not consistent. But it's a very bad type of arguing to do, like, someone who knows what they're talking about. Also, when you can't leave, when you're a captive to this kind of arguing. It's like when Sam Bankman-Fried got on stand and started making like Twitter arguments about like why he shouldn't go to prison forever. And everyone's just like, sir, that doesn't work here. Like, I don't think you need to familiarize yourself with the law.
The look over here, the Democrats, the hypocrisy, the and the marijuana legalization. Oh God, the corruption of our culture. People are gonna be smoking doobies. I mean, give me a break. That's equivalent to what I just described about the systematic way that Donald Trump tried to overturn the results of the election on multiple fronts desperately. And the Jack Smith indictment, first of all, like also, no mention of, in his view, of the Supreme Court ruling of presidential immunity, by the way, which paves the way for him to do a lot of these illegal actions. Those guardrails have been decimated by the Supreme Court. But I can't get over how his argument at the beginning was the bureaucracy will protect you from Trump's madness, okay? Don't worry about it. Also, I support the purging of the federal bureaucracy under Schedule F. I mean, that's all you need to hear.
I also think that he made such an interesting point to like, not interesting on purpose, but interesting in the context of the kind of problems that we have with information and media literacy in this country now, that, things are the way they are, where, he pretended like the things that she was saying was subjective. Like, it really calls into question the value of a show like this, or any debate with two sides of the political quote unquote spectrum that they represent, when there's just no agreed upon set of facts. There's no agreed upon mechanism by which we might establish an agreed upon set of facts. We're just like both saying things that we sort of believe, and one side might happen to be factually accurate, but the other side can, petty fog to the point in which they just go like, oh, well, we're all entitled to our own opinion. That's what we're doing here. And so like, I just think it's, why even have this show with her if you're not open to having not necessarily your mind changed, but at least acknowledging that some of the things that she's saying are it's factual, like not just like subjective.
Yeah, 100%. All right, guys, no more time for calls today. Sorry. I'm gonna read some IMs.
I've just never heard that guy make any sort of good point, even even argumentative. Like, there's plenty of right wingers that I disagree with, but they could at least somewhat talk their way into a position where there is some sort of subsection of an audience that will be like, all right, it's he's explaining how he got there. I've never heard that guy even do that. Like, he's just not very bright or good at his job.
Yeah.
He's like a real punching bag. Who was that liberal from like the Fox and Friends from all those years ago? Like, yeah, like who would just like
the
come up to
woman
the
you're
show to
thinking
get
of,
like slapped down?
Right? Are you thinking of the woman
There's
on
been a
Fox and
few.
Friends? The one with the glasses.
I would have to look it up.
Forget
Actually.
her
That's
name.
not
That's what they usually do. If you look nerdy and you have glasses, we're gonna hire you as the Fox News liberal, and our chiseled jawed conservative host is gonna knock you down a peg.
Yep. Dave from Jamaica, man, we need to be faster on the dial to make it in. It's just on Thursdays we're 5 of us chatting, so sometimes it just is hard to get to calls. But we did have some great calls today. I'm sure we'll take calls tomorrow. Bullprog, it's not a great analogy, but Pablo Escobar provided for people too. I'm not sure what that's in reference to.
Again, I am not looking at the history of different sorts of political groups and judging them. Even Israelis, like I think the zeroing in on like a pro-Israel march and looking at like say like the racism that might be exhibited by people there is less interesting to me than what the actual governments are doing and the aircraft carriers are doing and what the spokespeople for those governments are saying. So whether or not Pablo Escobar or Hezbollah or Hamas are saved by the grace of God, given an assessment of their ideology, is not really interesting to me remotely.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Bob Beckel.
Bob Beckel. I don't know who that is.
Wow, that's someone I forgot all about.
Who is that? Bob Beckel?
He was the round man on the rotund round individual.
I remember him now.
Deep cut
with suspenders. Yeah.
With suspenders, right. But he was like that old what show I'm thinking of. 30 Rock joke where
are we out? Are we frozen? Sorry.
Am I frozen?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, go. No, we're back. Sorry about that. Go on, Binder. I love 30 Rock, so I want to hear it.
He's like that 30 Rock joke where I think Dean Winter's character says it, explaining his politics. He says he's fiscally liberal and socially conservative.
Fiscal liberal, social conservative.
Yeah.
He's a great character.
That was Bob Beckel. That's that like old school like pro like union but like really racist guy. That was Bob Beckel.
I love that character, and I love his line. He's like, I failed the firefighter exam again. They're totally racist towards Irish people. He's great. That's the guy from the Allstate commercials. Sage Sunday. It was the submarine and K fiasco that made me realize how incredibly dumb Elon Musk is. Free Palestine. No one has used quantum mechanics to go to the moon. Either doesn't mean it's fake. This guy is a moron. Danish Purgatory. Emma, do you remember the Sex and the City episode with Miranda's baby shower? Is Carrie wearing a keffiyeh dress? Well, that would have been, what, like 2005 or something like that? Or so she may have been, but it may have just been a culturally insensitive situation. I mean, Cynthia Nixon, very pro-Palestine, wonderful, but I don't think at that time.
I don't think it imbued the entire show.
Yeah,
I'd have to rewatch it.
But I do hear that Sarah Jessica Parker is like the nicest person ever, so maybe she has good politics. Who knows? Kamala Koss, oh boy. Believe it or not, you can be autistic, ethical, and a nice person all at the same time.
And like funny and I mean Dan Aykroyd was on the spectrum. Don't see him making weird jokes and talking about his dick all the time.
Yes. Dango Bangle. Not only was my 28th birthday yesterday, I got a shout out from TMR, and I also just got hired for a well-paying job. Oh, wow. Woo! I can finally qualify for taxes, and I can buy my own home and move out. Congrats, Dango Bangle. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Wow,
I was
nice.
27 when I got this job and joined the workforce sort of in a permanent way. Congratulations.
Retaliatory strike. Many people thought Elon was Howard Hughes until he called the professional cave driver a pedo for pointing out a SpaceX proposed mini sub would never be able to navigate a cave to save trapped children. I personally thought he was likely an idiot when he promoted nuking Mars to turn it into a habitable environment. It was like he watched Total Recall and wasn't able to follow anything.
I bet if Howard Hughes had Twitter, we'd probably think differently about him too.
Yeah. He had issues, Howard Hughes. DSA Aaron in Atlanta. God, Crystal is so good. And Sagar is an idiot. Yes, that is true. Okay.
Are you Hawaiian? Because then your opinion doesn't count, obviously.
Obviously.
I did not follow that. Sorry to go back on, but the Catholic charities from Hawaii that are going to step into the
He said he'll get a judge from Hawaii, and it's just like, dude, you have the entire Fifth Circuit. The whole Republican apparatus goes through the Fifth Circuit with their most insane lawsuits. Like, there's no equivalent. There's zero equivalent on the Democratic side.
And nobody believes that Saagar holds those positions because he's just so upset about what's going on to like the labor force that's being undercut by that. He believes in mass deportation because he's a fascist.
Right.
Well, I mean, just to remind people, that's just a reference to like the Hawaiian judge who like shut down the Muslim travel ban from when Trump's like first year in office. Like that's what he's directly referencing. But it goes back to what I was saying, where it's like you just don't believe in the rule of law, even.
Yeah.
Like crazy to have that specific.
State.
Yeah.
Sushi with the Goys. I've been a Breaking Point subscriber since day one and used to think highly of Saagar just because he was willing to be on the show with Crystal. Ever since Vance was picked for VP, Saagar has lost his mind and the quality of the show has gone downhill. And Marsh should poach Crystal. Well, I think she's doing great on her own. But...
Yeah, I think she just keep punching the punch bag. Saagar comes from the same sort of swamp that JD Vance does. Venture capital, organized right-wing think tank. And they pick out the suits for him.
And the final I am of the day. Actually, I'll do this other one. This is about Saagar. Bobby Western query: is it possible to gaslight an entire nation? He's trying.
He's gaslighting himself.
The final I am of the day. Free Palestine says, as Norm Finkelstein said, growing up Jewish, we were always proud to be of big Jewish minds like Marx and Einstein. What is so Jewish about sniping children from perimeters of Gaza? Also, Einstein, anti-Zionist.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a skill issue for some, but I don't think of Israeli and Jewish as the same thing.
No.
Think of them entirely distinct.
It's absolutely not. All right, folks. Thanks so much. Great show today, guys. Thanks, Binder. Thanks, Brandon. Matt. We will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,